All right, so we're live. Welcome to the 10K subscriber stream and basically our 2018 look ahead broadcast. I have absolutely no topics planned for tonight, but I have been told that a few YouTubers might be coming on. But for the time being, we have, well, my lovely fiance, Catholic Wench. Okay. Yes, she is truly lovely, despite the fact that she does not like feminine names for YouTube channels. Although Catholic Lunch is very good. It's Imperial and
Hello.
Pius.
Hello.
So I'm just going to sort of bring up the chat here. So I don't know, guys. Thoughts on 2017? We're coming up on the New Year's here.
Bit of a rocky road, personally and publicly. You know, new president. A lot is interesting. Seems the war of the media and the culture war has ramped up significantly. I think the Milo Yiannopoulos' prediction that 2017 would be the year social justice died did not come true. I think the progressives are still. Maybe they're weaker in certainly in their public image in some ways, but certainly not in their potency.
Progressivism body may be destroyed, but its spirit has lost none of its potency.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I think the whole CNN blackmail was a big blow. I mean, that was absurd.
I'm surprised it didn't go further. I had wished that had gone further than it did. I thought it could have made some real steamroll progress, but it kind of died down like about 2 weeks after the whole incident.
Yeah, it's weird because, you know, Donald Trump's son was like, even he was like criticizing it. Even he was tweeting about it.
I think that if we could seize the event, and well, not we, but, you know, more vocal figures could have seized the event and really pounced on it, it could have made a bigger impact than it did.
Mm-hmm. But
sorry, can you remind me of what event are you talking about?
The one where back during the summer, where there was that guy that made the GIF of Donald Trump beating up CNN at the WWE, and then CNN tracked down the guy who made it and basically threatened to release his personal information if he didn't take it down and apologize.
Yeah, that kind of got lumped into the media just generally kind of being corrupt and scummy. It didn't actually form an independent news article of its own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And CNN's pretty much managed to shrug it off with little...
Well, they're already a shrinking company anyways. I mean, they'll probably just try and... I don't know what they'll do. They probably got some plans up their sleeve to try and, you know, update themselves to be relevant in the coming years. But I think that their current iteration of the TV mainstream news, that's probably going away.
Mm-hmm.
Slowly.
But what does that mean, going away?
I mean, their viewership dropping. I don't know. Then, I mean, I think they'll probably go the way of a lot of television in the coming years of basically, I don't know. I'm foreseeing the end of television as the sort of main platform of news and entertainment. I mean, it already sort of is.
It's going to survive on in the later generations or the later generations, but the new ones like the later half of the millennials, Gen X and later half of the millennials and Gen Z and all that, they're probably going to switch to, you know, the internet. I think that
they already have.
Yeah. The television is going to die as the generations advance. Is the point I'm trying to make.
Well, maybe it'll just go. I'm wondering, like, would there be a place for television in the future, the way radio still exists?
I'm sure there will be. I mean, we're not producing content of the quality and caliber that you get from a television program.
Perhaps like
true, but you have Netflix.
I think I was going to say Netflix and Hulu might carry the standard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I said before many times that I think, you know, the goal of something like YouTube would be to provide sort of NPR-like content. You know, if the ideas community on YouTube is really what it claims to be, it really is sort of like an environment where you get deep introspective thoughts in a way that you wouldn't get them in another environment. I think it would need to sort of go more
and sort of getting a level of honesty or things that, like, why do people look so fondly on stuff like Bob Ross or Mr. Rogers or Reading Rainbow? Isn't it because it's like, what was it about a lot of those PBS programs that people find sort of still endearing today?
Sentimentality.
Yeah, I think, in a lot of ways, one of, this is kind of the greatest irony. Does anyone know who Garrison Keillor is, or the Prairie Home Companion?
I've heard of him. I would occasionally listen to the classical music NPR thing in the morning. I think I just heard him read short stories or poems every morning.
Yeah, so Garrison Keillor, he was a radio personality. He was sort of, I would say he was sort of originally from Minnesota, but he later became sort of a West Coast liberal type. And upon hearing a rendition of the Grand Ole Opry, I think it was in the 80s, he decided that he would create a recreation of a classic radio show called Prairie Home Companion. And so this show sort of tried to recreate classic 1930s Americana for the listener and update it for the modern age. And it would sort of highlight largely storytelling, also live music that was actually played at the event. Catholic Bunch and I actually saw a performance of Prairie Home Companion. This was years after Keillor retired, but it was sort of, if you were to ask NPR listeners, or what I was to say, well, why is Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers popular? It sort of married the classic WASPy tradition to the mainstream coastal liberal sensibility. And Prairie Home Companion was the ne plus ultra of that perspective.
You have Bob Ross also seems to embody that. He's this sort of hippie-looking guy with an afro that's all peace and love and sort of gentleness. Offensive. But painting these very simple, American landscapes. This little tree's a bit crooked, so we'll send him to Washington.
No, yeah, that's certainly a good point. I don't know. I think that I don't think the legacy media is really going anywhere in the large sense. I
suppose it's still sort of convenient just to be able to turn your TV on and see what the news updates, rather than having to go onto the computer and look it up yourself. Just. Although you have your phone anyways, but, that requires reading instead of just listening to them talk about it.
I actually used to have a subscription to the National Catholic Register, and I'd read the newspaper when I got that, but I don't have the sub anymore, so.
Yeah, I don't know. The question I have going forward, I guess, is, I don't know, maybe we could just broadly read.
Somebody named Stephen Brocky did a live chat, says HK $250.
Do you have a strategic or tactical advancement stats?
What the? Okay, so someone super chatted me for 250 Hong Kong dollars. I have no idea how much money that is.
I'm gonna do it right now.
Okay.
So you're taking me out to dinner tomorrow?
$32 US.
He's either taking you out to. It's how much?
32.
Oh, 32. Okay.
He's taking you out to McDonald's, Catholic wench.
Looks like it's a McDonald's trip. So, okay. So do you? No, I have to answer this. Obviously, thank you very much for the super chat, and thanks for convincing me also that I should have been paying attention to the super chat more. I've been kind of fiddling with things. Question on the stats: do you have a strategic or tactical advice when stats matter or don't matter, i.e., abortion, immigration, Islam? B, I often take the Catholic stance in my arguments, but I tend not to infer religiosity for fear it won't be taken seriously. Okay, that's a lot there. This is going to be a good half an hour of discussion if we do this properly. So let's see. Abortion, Islam, immigration, and stats. I think what he means is moral cases versus statistical cases of harm, I guess. And I think that's a good one. I think, for instance, immigration would be I don't know, is immigration a problem per se, or is it only a problem because of the levels of immigration? I think that's fairly easy, right? It's the levels of immigration. It's a numbers game.
I think you could also argue what types of immigrants are coming in, though.
Yeah, I want to propose that we create an immigration policy that will keep Catholic wench out of the country. Okay, I'm sorry.
Welcome to Canada, distributist.
Okay.
Look,
Yeah,
I'm just waiting for Emperor Trump to just send in the army and liberate the country. I mean, I think some people should start launching human rights cases against the Canadian government for quashing freedom of speech.
He needs to secure the mandate of heaven over Canada.
No.
Okay, so we have to find a way to keep the immigration policy with getting lovely Canadians in, like my dear fiance,
and keeping bad operas out.
Wheels.
What? Okay, but sorry, I should take this seriously. I apologize. I mean, well, okay, go on, guys. Your thoughts on this?
I was going to say, yeah, I do think that numbers, sure, but also types of immigrants. So again, trying to ensure that the immigration policy is geared towards the national interest. So, like, let's say, highly educated Chinese businessman wants to come over and like start a business or like be a middle upper class, white collar worker. I think that's fine. Huge numbers of unskilled Muslim immigrants in Europe or Mexican immigrants in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
No. First off, illegal immigrants, it's sort of a no-brainer. No. But
yeah, I mean, it is ultimately a numbers game.
To quote Bill Clinton, we are a nation of immigrants, but we are a nation of laws.
Sure, but I wonder even if I think even on the upper end, even on the skilled immigration question, right? I think that it's. I'm not quite sure that it's a good idea to just take. For instance, every graduate student we graduate is from China. That's a problem, regardless of how skilled.
Wait, hold on. What do you classify as a skilled worker, though? I mean, I know people from England who have nursing degrees who can't even get a job in North America, and they even have degrees, right?
Was that a question for me?
So,
okay.
Well, for anybody, I'm sort of thinking people who can speak the language, who is employable and has sort of a clean criminal record.
Yeah, so our countries define them differently.
I mean, actually, to go off of your point there, Data, I actually do agree with you, because I was thinking about that as I was saying it, because, I was thinking more like the type of immigrant you'd want would be somebody that would be able to actually generate a job. Like, they want to come here and start a business, because that actually employs people. But you're right. Like, if the immigrants are highly skilled, well, that actually starts taking away jobs from, skilled, educated Americans.
I mean, well, presumably, this is the thing with the quote-unquote jobs thing. Presumably, all economic activity and growth creates jobs, not just business starting, right? I mean, business starting is a particular kind of economic growth that creates jobs.
Sure.
But being a productive employee and giving your company huge benefits and profit also creates jobs implicitly. So, but I think there is something to be said, and I'm not so sure exactly how to balance this. Because I think it is a balance. You don't want the upper echelons of your society, be it graduate students or medical students or doctors or lawyers or even business owners, to be dominated by people who have no cultural or ethnic connection to the host country, because then you're developing really sort of what could potentially become a caste, right? A class of people who see themselves as totally separated from the people they rule over, as opposed to someone who sees them as a native. He sees himself as a native son of the people who he's sort of governing.
A prince of peers, right?
Yeah. Now this idea needs to be developed, but I mean, let's go back to Stephen Broque's super chat. I definitely think immigration, it's a balancing act, right? The liberals aren't entirely wrong. Nations have always had immigrants. They're only wrong in the fact, they're wrong only statistically. They're only wrong in the fact that we're sort of at uniquely high immigration rates. But again, that's stats, right? It's not an absolute thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, well, this is a clarification. What does he mean by abortion? I'm going to scroll.
I was thinking, like, if you're going to be arguing against abortion, say, when would be an appropriate time to argue with the stats, and when would be an appropriate time to argue using the moral case? I think that's sort of what I got.
That depends on the ideology of the person you're speaking with.
Yeah, I was
thinking.
thinking.
Stuff like that.
I've made statistical arguments. there's sort of a Pascal's Rager argument I love using against progressives on the abortion front, which is that because they always say something along the lines of like, well, abortion, it's a gray area. Like, we kind of have this sliding scale. We kind of become gradually more human in the womb, and under that circumstance, the rights of the woman who is a fully formed human trumps the partially developed rights of the fetus. And if you're doing this whole partial human thing, you just have to ask yourself, well, we have 1.6 million abortions in this country. If, for instance, we had a question in this country about whether we could sacrifice 3 children a year to bail or whatever, right? Would we say yes to that? So how fractional does this fractional humanity of the unborn child have to be before it becomes like less in aggregate than the sacrificing 3 children to bail every year? I know, and I guess that's sort of a statistical argument against. It's kind of ridiculous, this idea of using statistical fractions of a human being, right?
Yeah, no, we're agreeing with you. I think we agree with you.
Is the stats on Islam thing also?
I think that's probably tied to immigration
statistics, or like.
I think that would probably be tied to either to both immigration and sort of like rates of like, and like their beliefs, like like 25% of Muslims believe in.
Nawalt basically, or Noxalt or whatever. Yeah. I mean, this is. I think abortion, the statistical arguments for abortion, they're fundamentally, they're kind of like cool and they can catch your opponents off guard, but they're, at the end of the day, they're sort of fundamentally not why people actually disagree with abortion.
I disagree.
Oh, really? Okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, the reason why I disagree is because the percentage in particular demographics of who has an abortion really shows the mindset of that particular demographic, the culture of that particular demographic. For example, say over a quarter of all abortions in the United States 2014 were from the African American community, and what percentage is the actual African American community for all the demographics of the United States? Like, that's pretty high, right? For all the abortions in the States. And I think that shows a bit of where their culture is coming from. Also, over 50% of abortions were people in their 20s. So that sort of shows the mindset of women in their 20s. Only 13% of abortions are for people who are married, right? So I think these sort of statistics are extremely important to know where these people are coming from and why they're making these decisions. Does that make any sense?
No, I think it's really important. I'll say this. The whole idea of the rape culture is a much derided concept among people on YouTube, especially people on the quote unquote YouTube right. People make fun of this all the time, but I think with 1.6 million abortions, it's really inarguable that quite a few communities in this country have an abortion culture. You have communities, you have some inner city communities where there are more abortions than live births. And that is something that is very distinctly.
And then, of course,
I don't know how to react to it. It's something that's important.
Well, and you think the fact that they're constantly, these communities tend to overwhelmingly vote progressive. It's certainly part of the culture as well. But if you're going to talk about rape culture, I remember you once saying that rape culture is hookup culture, and this is all intertwined. The fact that probably one of the primary reasons why abortion rates are so high now is because of the sexual revolution.
Yeah, well, contraception is probably the biggest influence.
I mean, that combined with...
when contraception doesn't work, then, oh no, they've got a kid now because they went and had sex with somebody that they shouldn't have. Oh no, what should they do? And then they have an abortion, so...
I I guess this sort of segues us into the last point that the super chatter Stephen brought up, which was
he often takes the Catholic stance in his arguments, but he tends not to infer religiosity for the fear that he won't be taken seriously.
I mean, I do this with most of my content on YouTube. a lot of my ideas do have an inspiration in Catholicism, but I don't argue them from a Catholic point of view because I know most of my audience is secular.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can understand, like, you know, you talk more from a philosophical and a metaphysical perspective, and less from.
And I generally think that's fine. I think though it's like, you know, sometimes I feel like you might just want to be honest, but I totally understand your way of thinking and your approach, because most people, you sort of have to, if you think about a lot of the people that you're getting from the skeptics, it's, you know, young Western men in their late teens and 20s who are secular, and if they've been conditioned, oh, religious people are these evil busybodies that are just as bad as the SJWs. If you just go out and say Catholic this, Catholic that, like they're probably going to get turned off. Whereas, like, if you actually, you know, articulate things the way you do, it's
we don't want to speak Christianese to secular people.
Yes,
and a lot of Christians, they speak Christianese, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they're speaking a different language, and I don't know. I think it puts people off. I mean, at some point I know there's a danger on the other side. You know, there's like the danger on the other side is like you start hiding your Christianity,
you
like
start becoming a bit. Yeah, exactly.
Like, and that's really bad too. But I don't know. I mean, I do it not because I'm ashamed of my Catholicism, because I just understand that.
You're trying to speak the right language. Somebody else donated the super chat.
Oh, whoa, okay. Okay,
I
well, that definitely
can see the moral high ground to baby killers. Also, more abortions equals more brown people, but whatever.
Okay, that message from the alt-right. Wait, before we get to the super chat, okay, stupidest argument of 2017. We need abortion because it gets rid of.
I think Richard Spencer made that argument. Did he? I want to say he did.
I don't know if Spencer was. Well, first of all, what is the argument? The argument comes from the alt-right, and it's a white nationalist argument for abortion. This is my official stupidest argument of the year. Goes to the abortion is good because white genocide.
Even though, you know, guess who also kills huge numbers of white people? Planned Parenthood. Maybe they proportionally kill more black people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, we're using sort of the Hitlerian logic. It's okay if it kills more of them than it does of us. Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, it's for me. I don't find it so as much as stupid as I find it sickening.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, okay. I guess the question is it more stupid than it is immoral, right?
You know, he just gave you another $2 in the super chat saying, I meant more brown people getting abortion.
Okay.
Oh, no. This is more about culture than skin color.
I need to answer these. I'm obligated to answer these super chats.
How do you answer that, though?
Never concede the moral high ground to baby killers. More abortion equals more brown people. Wait, what? More abortions equals...
Hold on, let's identify the problem. What's wrong with brown people?
Well, I don't understand is this seems to be the inversion of the argument, right?
Maybe this is like a progressive...
He made another super chat which clarified. He said, I meant more brown people getting abortion.
Okay, I see. So he
I think he is making the alt-right argument.
He is. I'm so okay. So yes, but okay. First of all, I'm not really like into the alt-right idea of like this race thing, so it's a moot point. But I mean, it's fundamentally a moral argument, right? I mean, like it's just basically like it's okay to kill people as long as we're killing more people of the kind of people I don't like. How can you incorporate this into a moral framework that values human life? I don't think you can.
I mean, it's almost like, you know, the argument of it's okay as, you know, it's okay that the war is killing millions of Germans so long as we're killing proportionally more Jews.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know. It also sort of, I don't know. It seems sort of divorced from the reality. A culture that's sick enough to kill infants for the convenience of its adults is a suicidal culture. It will find some way to destroy itself, be that whatever, be it demographically like the alt-right fears, or spiritually like I fear. Mm-hmm. I think that if it wasn't for even without the demographic problems that we're seeing right now, and that the alt-right is constantly talking about, right, we would still be undergoing a spiritual suicide.
He gave another $5 and clarified, I'm saying promoting abortion is killing more brown people, so abortion is bad.
Oh,
we're
sorry we had you spend all that money.
Oh, phew, good God. I thought, okay, I'm like, okay, thank God that's the argument, because I was about to say, like, thank you for giving me money, this is why you're an idiot.
Well, no, don't stop him while he's giving you money.
Okay. Quick, misinterpret this question a bit more.
Maybe he'll buy you guys a whole steak dinner.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So I'm sorry. We don't want to. I'm not trying to be trite. Okay, I'm saying. Okay. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. This is an excellent one too. Yeah. I've used this argument against progressives too. Right. That progressives say that Black Lives Matter. Black lives don't really matter to Planned Parenthood. That argument has not, in my, I mean, it's been kind of like satisfying and cathartic, but it hasn't been particularly effective.
Yeah, because I think they actually use the exact same argument on the other side that, well, actually, no, they have all their healthcare centers, located proportionally near places where people of color live, because they don't see abortion as morally evil, it seems.
And they also seem to think that Planned Parenthood offers more service. Well, they do, but it's all in conjunction with abortions. So
the Catholic, he toned it again, saying the Catholics love their indulgences.
Okay.
We're gonna start a.
Can we pray for him?
Okay, yeah, I will certainly pray for your
soul.
For your soul. But this money here does not excuse you from penitence and confession, unfortunately.
There's a really big problem in Catholicism where they're treating the faith like it's magic tricks and magic spells, and I think that's a huge misconception that even a lot of atheists share about Catholicism.
That's one of the things I've been trying to work through, is that when they try and explain to me what purgatory is, they say that, and indulgences and praying for people, and they say the way you don't think about it is well, you committed these sins, therefore you can expect to spend this much time in purgatory, but you did these virtues and people prayed these many indulgences, so this alleviates this amount of time. They say, don't think about it like that. It's not scientific in that sense,
Mm-hmm.
And the Catholic Church, of course, is always the church has always been firmly against magic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a reason we burned witches.
Okay. God loves black, white, and brown people, but he is angry that you don't post more videos. The skeptics are hobbled, fill the void. Well, thank you for the super chat, Mark Leek. What?
How does he know that God is angry with this?
I think it's a joke.
It's a joke, yeah. I think it's.
I know it's a joke. Sorry.
I was tagged. Someone said a baby develops a heartbeat 3 weeks into a pregnancy, so surely the 24-week cutoff point is murder.
The only tag people gave me was asking how tall I am. I ain't saying that.
Well, I mean, I'm not a biologist, and I don't claim to be. I mean, the majority of of course I can cite statistics if I need to, but it honestly comes down to my religious beliefs. And, for me, killing a soul is murder, and not like a human soul. And that is.
I'm definitely going to get to Mark Leek's super chat, but for the time being, I think that I want to take this question about abortion seriously. I think developing bright lines around starting heartbeats and the fetal pain, I think that's just a red herring. Neither side believes it. progressives dance around. Well, actually, right? The fetus believes that life begins. That the pain actually begins at 22 weeks. So killing a fetus at 20 weeks isn't actually murder. God, that's so disingenuous. If we discovered that pain began at 19 weeks, they wouldn't accept that as
well, don't forget, then, I mean, that means that if someone doesn't feel pain, then they're technically not human by their classification. So
yeah,
like,
there's
when you're
so
put
many
anesthesia and you're no longer a person, does that mean that you can't, like, it's like it's a disingenuous argument.
we can kill people in comas.
Yeah,
There's all sorts of corollaries to this. This is a disingenuous argument that's just it's sort of it's a mind game played by intellectuals to excuse something that they've already agreed to for other reasons.
Yeah, because again, the other end of pro-life, not the whole, oh, what about the mother? It's we also have to be against euthanasia, right, as well.
Okay, so yes, I think we destroyed abortion and the alt-right position. Well, I don't know if it was being voiced by anybody.
We thought it was, but
I thought it was because we were misunderstanding the super chats. But killing people is wrong no matter what color they are. We should have all learned this from Dr. Seuss, right? Okay, so let's take this other chat on. Mark Leake, God loves black, white. Well, I think that we all agree to that. But he says the skeptics are hoveled, fill the void. And I think that's the substance of his super chat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of the task. I think the skeptics, if I was to come up with a loser on YouTube for 2017, the quote-unquote skeptic community just about right now looks like a huge loser.
Mm-hmm. Well, in certain individuals.
Today, before you go on, Fritz, I just logged on today to see that the Drunken Peasants live stream is coming to an end.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I think that a lot of
we should start our own called the Sober Peasants.
The Sober Nobles.
Sober Nobles, yeah.
The Sober Nobles, yeah.
That would be interesting. Although, I mean, I don't know. Did anyone ever listen to that? I felt it was just my brain was about to explode.
Apparently, the mainstream media did. Apparently, the mainstream media did because they found the tiny clip, that clip of when Maya Lillian.
I was about to say that was when that was like that would
very.
Drunken Peasants blew up when people caught that clip of him doing the pedophilia defense.
It's weird. Like whenever I'd hear him talk about like, oh, and I don't want to repeat it here, but something about Father Michael. It's like I always thought like he was, telling a joke because you could hear from the context and the tone of voice that it sounded like he was joking, but I didn't know it was actually real. Oh well. But yeah, I was gonna say on something more serious than Milo Yiannopoulos, which would be about anything, is that I think that certain skeptics individually have done very well for themselves, like Sargon. Certain other ones have completely collapsed. And I think the idea of the community as a whole, if it did exist, it is on the decline. Like you even have a lot of people seem to be like opening, like somebody messaged us on Discord saying Andy Worski is now like, he wants to open up to have conversations with more people of different views.
Well, what was Andy Worski about? I only heard about him in tangent to other channels. What is his thing, even?
His big thing, I think, was like he's a skeptic as well, but his big thing was being against Francesca Ramsey and Black Lives Matter.
Revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, was there any like anti-bedroom feminist channel that didn't like get in on the Ramsey MTV stuff?
I don't know.
I thought that was like it was like huge bandwagon.
Mm-hmm. It is curious as to why they thought why MTV thought that was a good idea. I mean, I could have seen them making like a couple episodes, but when the overwhelming majority of the videos get like really bad get really negative feedback, it's like everybody hates the show. Why are we still attached to this woman? Although, think about it now, I'd suppose, they fired a woke black woman. Yeah, that's going to look good for MTV. Sorry, I was rambling a bit there.
I don't know. I think, so the Worskis were originally anti-SJW types. Mm-hmm. That's my understanding.
Mhm.
I think that's how most secular channels kind of sprung to any sort of prominence, was through being an anti-SJW. I mean, almost every single
Well,
name.
no, TJ wasn't.
That's true.
We've got another one.
Do Jews go to
thank
hell
you
if
for
they don't
Another
believe in
$2.
Christ?
Oh my God, really?
No, they do not. No,
Wait.
they don't.
Really?
Uh,
Really? I believe they do not go to hell.
I-
Number one, we cannot determine who goes to hell and who doesn't, okay? We all know that, okay? We cannot judge the conscience and what other people go through to make their beliefs. So no, I don't. I think it's kind of silly to blanket that
well,
someone
you can't say that they won't defend you.
I gotta
don't
say
think-
this.
Okay,
I
Blackjack.
think that not believing
One
in
at a time,
Christ is a
guys.
hard line for hell. I think that is probably not something you can get away with.
didn't Pope Pius, Blessed or Saint Pope Pius X have a good quote about this?
No, he has a quote about Zionism where he said, "The Jews have rejected Christ, and so I must reject the Jewish people," or something like that.
Mhm.
Or was
That's
it
not dogma, though.
Pius?
No, it's not dogma. We're just quoting. But that this is immaterial. We can't make any statements about who is in hell and who's not.
That's true.
You can't make a definitive statement, but it's incorrect to say that Jews do go to heaven definitively. You can say that you don't know. That's really the only correct affirmation.
Why can't we just say that?
We should.
Yeah, I think
We just
that's. I
Do
think
Catholics
that's
go to
special.
hell? Yeah, I think it's fair to say even Catholics can go to hell, right?
Yeah.
So
well,
they can't.
anyone can go to hell, and we don't know if anyone has.
Yeah.
I really don't know how healthy it is to start, especially collectively. I don't know how healthy it is to talk about. I don't know if it's healthy to talk about whether individuals go to hell, and I'm pretty certain it's not healthy to talk about whether groups go, right? Because nobody goes.
I think we can. The only things I think we can really make definitive statements on are the sins directly condemned by St. Paul in like Corinthians and Romans, but.
Yeah.
Larry has just said John 3:16 doesn't reel.
Oh gosh, oh that's fun. Oh, and hi everyone.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Just fine in this cold day.
It's less than 10 degrees where I am.
It ain't chilly
It's
over here.
56. Wait, no,
Yeah, I was about to
John
say,
3:16.
it ain't chilly here.
Well, I
no,
did
no,
super chat.
It's
Send another super chat. What did he say?
I think he's trying to accuse us of not taking John 3:16 seriously if we say that we don't know if other people of other religions or of a pagan persuasion go to hell or not, right? I mean, this has been
I think that's a bad way of looking at this stuff, right? We should be more looking at how we actually attain salvation, or what. And a lot. It starts, at least for me, the way I understand it is, it starts with faith in Jesus Christ. Which, if you're going to be religiously Jewish, you cannot.
Ben
Shapiro's going to hell.
I do think that if you don't.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, this stuff right here is just so. It just to me, it's all this whole stuff is pointless. Actually, it just seems like it's just what type of thing is, and just saying what type of stuff about this. No one knows who's going to hell or heaven or anything else. We don't know what certainty it is, and I don't. We should be sitting here arguing about things that are, not saying beyond our station, but it just seems like it's not really
out of our control.
Exactly.
I mean, I think I can just conclude this by saying that, first off, if we're going to think about salvation, the first person we should think about in terms of salvation is ourselves. And then there's a good reason, and then following Christ's commandments, which is to spread the good news. We're supposed to evangelize to people.
I think that's the best way of putting it. Let's move on to whether individuals or groups are in hell. I don't know that's an appropriate conversation to have in a public. I welcome to the chat Coach Red Pill, Blackjack, and Charles.
Yes,
So
AKA
3 new people.
Just, you know, a guy on YouTube who's at least does the most sillier stuff here. Not the intellectual. I'm just a guy who just likes watching pro wrestling and put pro wrestling stuff on YouTube. So, yeah, I'm not really the smartest person here, but I do sometimes make interesting points.
Hey, distributors, I just wanted to stop by and congratulate you on your 10,000 subs.
Thanks, man. Congratulations on your own 10,000. I have to say, guys, I Coach Red Pill is good enough to invite me on stream after stream, but it always seems to land times I can't make it. Oh, I really feel bad at missing that Teal Deer one, Coach. But we'll have to do it some other time.
Yeah, the Teal Deer one was really terrific, and my own 10,000 was like a complete shit show. It's funny as hell, but I'm glad to see that you obviously have just much better guests than I did, much more civilized and intellectually profound. And so I just wanted to thank you, distributors, for your content, and say hello to everybody here.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
You had a couple interesting days, Coach, by the way.
What do you mean a couple of interesting days?
Oh boy.
hold on, guys. I'm going to get a drink.
Oh no.
Pepper for me.
Oh no,
Get something
he's
strong.
not-
Is
he's
it
gonna
time
come
to
to
break
my
out the hard liquor already?
Well, but you know, it's been, well, I mean, looking like other places. I mean, all over YouTube, it's one community crumbling, and now someone's rushing to get into that nice little, the feeling that niche and everything. I just, you know, personally, just always, you know, there's always going to be something crumbling. But the thing is, with these like software community and YouTube, and what you do, produce, and what like the students produce and everything else, even the skeptics and everything else, it's not like, oh my god, the main thing on YouTube. It's usually the, you know, most things that sell on YouTube is stuff like, say, you know,
Video
entertainment
games.
stuff.
It has to be entertaining, pretty much.
And once it's entertaining, it does lose its, you know.
Well. So I mean, you basically you have to pick your audience, right? Do you want to have an audience that's just there to be amused, or do you want to have an audience that actually is interested in thinking? And you know, I gotta say, you gotta pick your choices carefully, depending on which one you get.
Speaking of all of this, I'm getting ready to like punch the next person in the face that says, if I complain, I don't want to see the new Star Wars movie and these movies all look stupid, say, oh, it's just a movie, turn your brain off. I'm like, that's something they would say in an Orwellian nightmare, is, oh, just turn your brain off, stop thinking.
Actually, I would always think that rather than an Orwellian nightmare, I think it's an Aldous Huxley nightmare.
Yeah, that's true. People that's something people always say is like, you know,
this is Orwellian.
People that want to pretend that they're smart say, oh, this is like Orwellian, but people who are actually smart but want to pretend to be even smarter go, well, this is actually just more like Brave New World.
Yeah, but you know, the reason why some people just do the turn the brain off thing, they're like, look, not every movie needs to be analyzed to a fine-tooth comb, you know, that sort of thing. It's not type of stuff there. Like, say that, I think that was
First, we gotta grab a big one of those brain memes. We gotta put like Harry Potter at the tiny brain, and then you gotta have George Orwell, and then Brave New World,
and then Star Wars.
You'll have Star Wars, which honestly, if you want my whole thing, I thought it was like fine. Wasn't the worst thing in the world. I've seen worse films, and believe me, I have seen way worse films. I mean, I'm a movie critic as well. You know, I do see terrible movies, but yeah, it's not like something that like people are getting so upset about. It's funny how people get all upset about these like fictional worlds and fictional characters
because people don't have any real.
The
new Star Wars movie, it sort of perfectly embodies the current cultural perspective, where we simultaneously want to destroy the past and also replicate it exactly for ourselves, right? We want to sort of condemn the previous baby boomer ancestors, but we also want to have what the baby boomer ancestors had, you know, or baby boomer, you know, parents had in its exact essence, right? So you know, we have to say, like, kill off all of the old Star Wars characters, but we still have to have like even though all of those old Star Wars characters defeated the Empire, we have to re-replicate the same situation, tell the exact same story, where like, you know, new faces, new millennial faces are superimposed on top of the older baby boomer ones. And we have to pretend like the same thing is fundamentally different.
And
the Red Letter Media's review of their Half in the Bag episode of The Last Jedi had an absolutely excellent like last 10 minutes where they're dissecting the Star Wars culture, and they're like, you know, they have these like Star Wars celebrations where there's these like rallies, you know, stadiums filled with like 50,000 people, and it looks like a political rally with like Kathleen Kennedy up front, like banging her fists on a podium, and it's like it's become a cult for people, as opposed to like they talk about in 1977, it's like Star Wars was a thing where this was a good movie, people liked it, and like, but it seems people have like lost their own identity, so and they're rejecting the real world, and the reason why they get so obsessed with these fake realities is because the reality they live in seems so boring in comparison, and it seems so sort of disheveled, and not like a lot of them don't have families, they don't have, you know, children or wives of their own, and like they're trying to seek anything to fill the void, and that's why a lot of them get really so riled up about all these you know, trivial little issues.
People these days really have nothing real to fight for.
Everything has been fought for. Everything has been conquered. Everything has been done. What do you do with a generation to tell them that basically everything has been taken care of? You don't have
to sure everything has been taken care of.
That seems an exaggeration.
We haven't conquered the moon yet.
Well, yeah, and that type of I honestly think that's our next big step, and I think that's one way we can be united is that next frontier. You know, cheesy as it is, but the one thing that the thing is right now, what we see here is like what we're doing on this planet Earth is what is like, you know, oh, we have this great story that already been done. Oh, we have this great idea to this government idea. No, it's already been done. Oh, we have this. It's already been done. And it's like just you can't. And if you even try to do anything new, for example, like say third party voting, like saying, hey, we got this. It's shut down immediately because we can't rock the boat. You can never rock the boat. That's why you see all the skeptics. You see everything was first thing about the free speech thing. Is that, you know, everything was the social justice. They wanted to not rock the boat because everything seems scarier because of the terrorism. We just aqualents and just we go back to our little movies and little things like that. It's going to be okay. No, don't rock the boat. Well, the boat needs to be rocked.
Sadly, I would love to plan a mass anti-voting rally in the next couple elections called "Rock Against the Vote" instead of "Rock the Vote."
that would be an interesting.
Yeah, as lovely as an idea as it is, though, we'd have to market it correctly, which would be frustrating.
The hyper, you know what the perfect way to do it.
I don't even necessarily know if it's a marketing thing as much as it is just, you know,
advertise it as.
No, advertising as much as it is just getting people to, like, you can only advertise something that's unpopular, like being anti-democratic so much. In this age, being democratic is popular. So you would first have to find a way to make it unpopular before any sort of marketing would be kind of
Okay, before we get into marketing not voting, I think I am obliged to answer super chats, even though they sort of take us back.
Okay.
I guess I got several super chats about religious stuff is pointless, scripture is relative, it's situational from Larry Steele.
Sam Day been saying a lot of money.
That one guy's
Sam Day says one good verse proving purgatory is 2 Timothy 4:1, 2 Timothy 4:1, and then Larry Steele breaks in again and says, "Thank you, distributors, from running from the question."
You're running from the Jewish question. Not the alt-right one, but the.
Does that mean we should get Mr. Medicare in here?
Oh no.
Okay.
Let's not crash the screen with no survivors just yet.
I agree. I don't know. I don't have my Bible app open, but that is the passage that is the basis for purgatory, right?
Go ahead and tell me what verse, Data.
2
Timothy 4:1.
I'm not going to hand through my Bible. But,
Can I maybe try and get us to a topic that I think might be interesting to talk about? Is that back to the sort of Star Wars thing? Is that it almost feels like the bigger problem in the modern world is like, yes, as those of us who are believers here want to, bring people to God, but I think if there's a step that needs to see. It almost seems like there's a step that needs to be taken before that of being able to convince people. There's a lot of convincing that needs being done to convince people that there's something that's called real. People are starting to like lose their grip on accepting the idea that reality exists. And a lot of that, I think you can tie that in with them trying to escape to these worlds, because you ask a lot of people now with video games, movies, and TV shows, they say it's not about the story or the characters. It's about the quote unquote experience. It's them saying like I can like find quotes of people just going like, it's just about trying to get lost in this world. And it's like, it sounds sad when you look back at it.
It comes from a heart of, discontent with reality.
Yeah. And I think
I could actually say
to Timothy,
people have ignored the harm that it's done to us, but fascination of our youth with fiction and how encapsulated they are by it. Like, if you ever, go on social media, that's probably like 90% of what people converse about anymore is simply their fictional characters or fictional stories or how they relate to fiction. No one talks about reality anymore because they're scared by it.
No,
Yeah,
I agree.
in my opinion.
I agree. It's not an issue that they're scared of reality, and the reason that they talk about fictitious universes is because they have a point in common. Because that's the problem: a lack of common experience. You see, everybody watches a particular movie, and you can wind up talking about it. You can talk to somebody, about the Star Wars pictures, and this one sucked, and this one was great, and whatever. This character was a Mary Sue, and this was a real one, whatever. But you have a point of common experience. That's the problem that we're having in our society: the lack of common experiences, the atomization of experience. What?
Well, I think actually atomization of experience gets to the point, right? Because I think that in all societies, people, they seek a common mythopoetic language in order to express ineffable truths, right? Has anyone ever seen that Star Wars episode called Damok, where the alien race, Star Trek, yeah, the one where they talk. I mean, even when I'm doing this an analogy, but they encounter an alien race whose language is entirely allegorical, right? And so every time they need to invoke an emotion or an expression, they have to reference a story. And since no one knows the stories, they can't communicate. And so this is I think humans aren't entirely like that, but I mean, even my example demonstrates that we are in some ways like that. Analogy and reference to pieces of art, it tends to be a way of communicating. Hard to communicate facts about the reality of existence that can't be expressed in numbers or just direct formal language.
And the problem, though, is that I think we would say is that the narrative of a lot of the stories that are produced now is one we think doesn't reflect reality. That is, of the progressive story.
Yes.
And I think they even try. I mean, everybody sort of does this through history, but like, American quote unquote conservatives sort of started with 1776, but the modern world we live in right now, history starts in 1945 at the end of World War II. And Nazis and white slave owners from the 1850s were the worst human beings that ever lived on Earth. And that's why you have this. That's why the Nazi pejorative has the effect it does, and why America especially is a society so completely, focused on race. So how it's something that can always sort of bring. Go ahead.
We've changed in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, to in the beginning, white men oppressed the heavens and the earth.
A little bit.
What does that make the serpent? Is the serpent the Nazi party, or
The serpent?
I think the serpent would be, probably maybe not just
the serpent would be the communists. That's my
No.
the whole allegory.
I think you're going. I think that's going a little too into it. I think it's not in the beginning white men. I think to clarify, it's not that history started in 1945. It's that AD started in 1945. So there is a before, and that's just all evil where there's only darkness.
Yeah,
but then
and before,
the progressive
before
victory,
the oppression of oppression of Western civilization was what was before.
Yeah,
and you had, and sort of much like the sort of story of Israel.
So I guess FDR is kind of the Julius Caesar of.
Okay,
guys, I have to ask people a favor. Please wait till the last speaker puts a period at the end before you attempt to cut in. Just
Sorry,
a general courtesy, okay?
What I was going to say is that, yeah, like, and you could sort of see the people of Israel, the sort of the thing that was holding that sacred light, because a lot of them will say, well, you know, before civilization existed, you know, before the white man started to conquer everything, the world was at peace. They sort of see like the revolutionaries, you know, of course, like the communists and the Marxists and the socialists in the late in the 19th and 20th centuries as sort of that continuation of that light until the sort of victory over the dragon of National Socialism. And then these slow sort of them working their way into control of society, and now they're, as you know, the Mencius Moldbug example, they're the cathedral. They are the all-encompassing narrative structure and power structure of modern Western society.
Okay, so at that point, I'm just going to cut in with a super chat. This one is from Catholic Wench. And the message is, talk about my glory. Well, indeed.
Okay.
Well, my illustrious fiance is a woman whose intelligence is only surpassed by her beauty. She has an awesome YouTube channel, which you should check out, called Catholic Wench. I'm not so sure she's really decided what she wants to exactly focus on, but it's sort of, we're working on it. And I'm going to include the links in the description after this stream posts. But Catholic Wench, do you want to talk a little bit about your own glory right here?
No, but I have a question for you. It appears that a lot of people think that our culture is going to shit. We are discussing whether or not a person's skin color gives them any worth, whether or not we should integrate ourselves with people same skin color, you know, yada, yada, yada. So my question is, because everything seems to be going to shit, and you guys are all getting your knickers in a knot about how our world's going to shit, what do you do to bring a little bit of positivity and beauty into your lives when you're not obsessing about this kind of stuff?
You want to go first?
Well, I'll go first. I think that I recognize that pessimism is my own personality flaw, and if I'm going to right here in this stream make a New Year's resolution, it's going to be to be less pessimistic in 2018. I've got to cure this about myself, and you know, I know I'm planning a series where I tear apart nerd culture, but hopefully, you know, in that nerd culture series, when I tear it down, I'm actually going to try to build it up, because I can't just, you know, I feel like the alt-right series, like I kind of don't like it very much, because my solution to the alt-right was, oh, I'm going to beat them by being more depressing than they are.
So you just want to beat them to being more emos, to the point you're just going to like wear the eyeliners and, you know, just go.
I don't.
Yeah, the alt-right were the goth kids, and I went emo on them, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
So that was my solution.
So you want Richard Spencer dressed in all black and like having black eyeliner?
No,
Doesn't
I mean, he does already
wear eyeliner. Anyway, sorry. That's my so my resolution.
It might be an improvement.
Is to be more positive in my public persona here, at least. Does anyone else want to take a shot at what they want to do about? Or I think naturally YouTube sort of facilitates a pessimistic worldview.
Well,
want to take a shot at
question again, Catholic Wench?
You know, if we're trying to influence people, I don't think we can do it with simply pessimism. I mean, there's got to be something else that we could. I don't know. It's just when the distributors got me into YouTube, I thought it would be fun, and I thought it'd be very interesting. And I'm looking around, and some people have like a really, really screwed up views, and they're being really obsessed about it. My question is, what are you guys doing?
They just donated $10, so don't say too many bad things about them.
Well, no, I mean, what do you do on a positive thing to sort of balance yourself from all of this negativity and pessimism? I know that's a really girly question, and I'm sorry to irritate you with that. But I think it's really
Well, one of the things that I noticed in my own case is that when I produced a couple of videos a little while back, one on James Joyce, whom I used to admire greatly when I was a kid, but then later I just learned to just dislike for various reasons that I got into in a post. And on the other hand, I talked about Alexander Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag Archipelago, and why I liked him, and why, as a younger kid, I read him and I was a little bit ambivalent about it. But as I got older, I grew to admire him more and more. And the positive post on Solzhenitsyn was much better received by my audience, because ultimately I think that that's what people crave, and that's why they are turning to YouTube and independent content creators. I mean, think about the number of people who are watching this area of YouTube. It's an enormous number of people. We're talking millions of people. I would, if I had to venture to guess, I'd say about 1.5 to 2 million people are watching us, watching this neck of the woods of YouTube. That's a lot of people. And keep in mind, all these people tend to be adults, tend to be educated. Why are they watching it? Well, because the mainstream media is not producing the content that they identify with or are interested in. The fact that the post that I did on Solzhenitsyn, which was positive, and had a much better reception among my audience, my subscribers, has shown me that, yeah, you have to do more positive content, not in the sense of like, shiny, happy people kind of bullshit, but rather content that people can, because people want to go to a mountaintop. They don't want to be sitting around staring at a fire saying, woe is me. They want to strive to the mountaintop, no matter how hard that mountaintop might be, because it gives them a sense of purpose. And so that's how I viewed it in terms of my comparison between James Joyce and Solzhenitsyn. I don't know the experience of the other people here.
I mean,
that's an excellent example.
To sort of to go off on that, sorry, is the way I think about it. I think to connect it to the beginning of the stream with NPR distributists is that there is always going to be a substantial portion of people that they want more than the latest pop culture news and celebrity gossip. They want bigger ideas, and they in previous years they would have gone to places like, they would have been able to get their fix of high culture and high ideas from NPR, from public radio, from a lot of the sort of mainstream established publications and outlets. But now, as the progressive march continues on through culture, increasing numbers of them become very, very disillusioned with those, and they're seeking out, culture that's not media outlets that aren't producing that, aren't saying that, they aren't towing the party line. And I think that what I would love to see, I mean, I know this is just me being an armchair philosopher or whatever here. I think what would be great to see from this sort of particular neck of the woods of YouTube would be, the quote-unquote traditionalists, is I think we have a great opportunity to not just like talk about, okay, here's what the progressives did this time, here's another anti-SJW rant. It's also just be able to reintroduce, I think there's a huge opportunity here to help reintroduce people to high culture.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but I definitely think that Coach is onto something. I think we need to focus a lot more on positive aspects, give people positive role models, tell you this thing you want to take a look at, generally just be more positive, not necessarily in personality, not say this is bad, this person is doing this wrong. I mean, I'm not that there's not a place for these kind of things, but I think that people would be a lot better, like, displaying positive virtues.
We have to get past the sort of Jon Stewart of we have to get past the skeptic mindset of criticize everything, stand for nothing, so no one can criticize you.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But that thing is one of the main bread and butters of.
Let me make my point, man. I was gonna, basically end with, we have to get away from the turd flinging monkey mentality that, like you said, Jon Stewart has sort of got into a lot of our heads, right? He was sort of the ultimate of that character. And we need more people who display positive virtues or give people something to aspire to or something to look at rather than something to sneer at or, look down upon.
Because you also think like you and people, even channels as small as ours, relatively speaking, have an influence on the people that watch us, and some of them sort of would look up to us, and it's like, you think about it, that if you constantly have this culture of, I'm going to be this aloof asshole like Christopher Hitchens and criticize everything in a silly accent, but sound very erudite while I do it, well, people are going to try and emulate that because they think that's what the cool kids are doing. And at some point, you actually have to do. I think people have to display real bravery and say, "These are ideas that I believe in. This is a work of culture that I produce, like a story or a song or something like that, and stand by it and accept the slings and arrows."
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that you see, when you criticize things but stand for nothing, you can accrue a greater audience. You see, for example, in a specific case that I can point to in my own in my own quote unquote career. At one point, I did a video that was mildly critical of MGTOW, and I got a lot of people who unsubscribed. I was critical of MGTOW because I wanted to stand for something else. I didn't want to just be shitting on people and being all negative on people, right? And because of that, I lost a bit of an audience. But if I played it smart and not done that, just kept on criticizing in general, but standing for nothing, I would have, continued growing my audience, and those MGTOW would not have, been turned off by it, because what I was proposing went against what MGTOW is espousing, you see. But somebody like Jon Stewart, for example, in the same category, obviously not, but he criticizes everybody, stands for nothing, and therefore he never alienates anybody, because everybody is like at a cool remove and just ha 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 laughing at everybody. And that way you can continue accruing more and more of an audience. So you see, once you stand for something, that means that automatically by standing for that thing, you are standing against a certain audience who will walk away from you. And it's the fear of losing an audience that keeps a lot of people on the easy street of being skeptic about everything, about being a turd-flinging monkey and just throwing shit at everything, and never distancing yourself and saying, this is what I stand for. That's my thinking.
Yeah, that's the hard thing to do. Can I say things?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to get back to the root of Catholic Winch's question, where she said, what do you do to balance the negativity in your life? And this is going to sound kind of like a lowbrow answer, but honestly, if I've had a really bad week or a really bad day, nothing makes me happier than to go to Mass and help out the community. Really, for me, serving others is kind of, in an odd way, it's probably the greatest form of pleasure. It's really great to go out and help the parish community, especially because, we're post a disaster, to go out and help and, to see people smile, honestly. And, volunteer work is a surprisingly satisfying occupation to busy yourself with if you've nothing else to do. It's really great to go out and help people in need, and to see their joy when you.
Yeah, that is really.
That's probably that's in my opinion, that's the best way to find positivity, is through serving others. That's the point I wanted to make. I hope I didn't drag it out too long.
Oh no,
that's a great point.
Yeah, because eventually, actually, in my life, not eventually, I'll need the wrong word. Yeah. It's when I helped my family out, I helped my brother move out this past weekend. Let me tell you, it was hard, but it was actually nice to help people out. I'm always trying to do that, trying to be helpful, and it's always more fulfilling, and always to do that. It's always good to do these things. It's good to try the things, that the little things we seem to forget. We seem to forget, like, we look at the world, we see, my gosh, everything is destructive. We see everything is like the world's coming to an end. We see this, that, and the other, what's going to happen. But we forget the little kindnesses, as cheesy and dopey as it is. I think we need to have more of that. The little bit of kindness.
Yeah, a smile on the smile on the little girl's face as you walk past with the crucifix. It's a nice feeling, as you march up to prepare the incense for Mass. It's in my opinion, it's one of the best things. It's one of my favorite things I do, all week, is to go out and serve at my parish, and, to watch the joy of the Lord, wash upon the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and let me answer my thing right quick. What makes me actually happy. Probably the most generic of everyone else here is now just helping people and family out, but also doing a bit of writing. Writing for my show and thinking about like jokes I can put in my videos and such. I love doing that. It always brings a smile on my face. See how clever I can be. Also is just being a little information, like, in my little square YouTube. I'm not like Red Pill or to this. I don't talk about these type of issues. I'm on the entertainment side because it's easy to really feel like, and I say what you guys do is easy, but it's like, I can just sit and do a channel and talk about that stuff. But I came into YouTube more of an entertainer and such, because I liked actually making people, putting smiles on people's faces as
well, ultimately, everybody's here as an entertainer.
Yeah,
we're all entertainers here.
Yeah, so there's a dimension of entertainment to our. I think Pi has put it. I should say, like, service, inspiration, and really giving yourself over to something is the keys to being positive and being happy. But I just a few super chats. I need to get these out of the way.
Cool.
And they kind of take us back to entertainment and pop culture. First of all, I'm going to read them in reverse order. First one's just a truism or a true statement, and that is, the Christian has no reason to be pessimistic, for his hope is in Christ. And that is also true. I should be more ashamed of my pessimism than I am. I am. Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
I oftentimes wear my pessimism like armor more than I wear my faith like armor, and that's a problem. So that's a well-said thing. Thank you for Tom 6286 for saying that. I kind of put a good period on this conversation. Now this gets us back into entertainment and culture, but Endeavor has just super chatted us. Hopefully pop culture dying gets people more interested in history and God. Captain Cook is cooler than Captain Kirk. Jesus is cooler than the Force. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I will say, though, stories have always helped people understand true religious concepts. And I'll say fiction is always part of a healthy intellectual diet. I just think it needs to be better directed towards actually real ideas.
I think
it's
no, I don't. I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. I don't believe it's that stories have been in order to understand religious thought. I think stories have existed in order to understand reality.
Sure.
I'm not quite distributed. I'm not quite sure what you mean. Can you like restate what you said there about stories? Because it
wasn't meant to be a hugely controversial statement. I'm just saying that if he says that pop culture is dying, so history should people should get more interested in history and religion. And I think it's good that people are interested in history, religion, and and philosophy. But also I think pop culture is always going to be with us. People are always going to go to stories to understand concepts. Things like, Crime and Punishment, for instance. For many people, reading that book made them believe in God, or higher metaphysical concepts of good and evil. So fictional stories, if they're properly directed, they can be a way to breaking into different things that you might not
have in the past.
And even pop culture might be able to. People put it down, but pop culture is just what ordinary people consume, and there's some good to it.
I mean,
there's good to fairy tales too.
I think that the problem that we're having with pop culture today is that we don't quite seem to understand what pop culture is. My thinking has never been that pop culture in and of itself is interesting. What's interesting about pop culture is the fact that people latch on to it. For example, the Harry Potter novels, which we all know, and I'm assuming most of us or all of us love. Why well, okay, I'm not going to get into that point, but my point, why is it that everybody latched onto it? I mean, why is it that story touched so many people? Well, because it had certain elements that we all appreciated. An alienation from family life by the main character, his discovering a community of people where he was not just welcomed, but considered special by something inherent to him that he didn't have to prove. right? Then there's the issue that he had like a group of friends, Hermione and the Ron Weasley character, who were like his best friends, who understood him completely, and never questioned his motivations, never ostracized him, or that he was never on the outs with these people, right? Even if he might have been on the outs temporarily, quote unquote, with the people around him. Then there was the mentor father figure of Dumbledore, who was somebody who was wise and welcoming and indisputably loving towards Harry Potter. And then there were the other, secondary characters. There was the antagonistic Snape, who was a minor irritant but constantly there. And then on the other hand, there was the what was the name of the teacher who was very, very strict, but with a heart of gold kind of thing.
McGonagall.
Yeah, well, all of these characters, all of this entire world, which I think that J.K. Rowling, stumbled upon. I don't think that it was a calculated decision. It appealed to everybody's sense of what they lacked in their lives, and that's why people latched onto it. My thinking is that so much popular pop culture, I'm not talking about the things that are pushed by marketing departments to become popular, but things that are actually popular, like organically popular, like Harry Potter, for instance. They fill a need that, and we imagine ourselves in them. And so many people latched onto it because to so many people, the elements of the Harry Potter novels satisfied deep longings and things that they lacked in their own lives.
I borderline disagree with this.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that's a really good analysis of showing things that we supposedly lack in our lives and that we have something that we can relate to. But I do think there's a similarity between being sold the Harry Potter stories and being sold the latest tune on the radio. Whereas I really think no matter what the size of what it is we're being sold, we're not being sold products. We're not being sold a story. We're not being sold music. We're being sold a lifestyle, which is the only thing that packages these products and what delivers to us. So I think we're trying to adopt lifestyles that we think we're entitled to or that we really want, rather than looking at cultivating what our own lives have.
Wait, how would Harry Potter be selling you a culture? What, there's an actual Hogwarts that we can all apply to? We can actually have magic wands and live that kind of life?
Kind of, yes.
Well, I'll say
that's called government.
I'll say this about Harry Potter. I mean, I think what's kind of odd to me about Harry Potter is that I think previous generations would have read something like Harry Potter, and it would be referenced to a world and a structure and an order that they were more familiar with. I think when people read something like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the lives of Peter, Lucy, Edmund, and Susan were something that they could associate with. They were sort of more everymen. Whereas in some sense, the boarding school experience and the camaraderie of classmates who understand you completely is in some sense as romantic as the magic wand that Harry Potter uses to summon up all his apparitions. The nostalgia is as much for a dying aristocratic age as it is for a magical age that never existed.
And the fact that Harry is not an everyman. He is although I think in most stories you can't have a story that doesn't have a real protagonist that is special in some way, but I think one of the faults I would have with the books is the fact that they pushed the idea of Harry Potter as the savior of the world way too hard. But I would say that what you were going for, Catholic Wenches, I don't think it's so much the lifestyle as I think the problem with pop culture I think I see is that if it's supposed to be, it should serve as a bridge or a part of a balanced diet that leads to or includes high culture. But people watch Star Trek, which alludes to certain higher ideas, but they leave it there. They don't explore it further. And it seems to just ball up, and people make so much out of these little universes that at this point they buy things for the brand. They are buying a label.
Conversation.
I actually believe that G.K. Chesterton goes over this in chapter 3 of Orthodoxy about his suicide of thought.
Yeah, suicide of thought. That is.
Doesn't he? If I'm recalling correctly, doesn't he go over it in chapter 3? I think.
Well, suicide of thought. Can you hear me, Pius? Hello.
Yes, I can.
So I'm
Yes,
just getting a lot of talk over. So in the Suicide of Thought, Chesterton goes over how if you question everything, essentially you question your ability to question, and the whole endeavor of critically examining things goes out the window. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes, but I believe he specifically mentioned the evolution of the fictional tale from what's the word? The previous era to the modern age.
I think that was in the next chapter, the ethics of Elfland.
Or was it in chapter 4?
Yeah,
Okay,
so he said that the classic fairy tales imagine what an ordinary person would do in an
That's it. Yes,
extraordinary
that's
world.
exactly what I was
Right?
thinking.
Yeah, but a modern dry novel imagines what an insane person does in
Yes,
the
it's
ordinary.
an insane person.
Right.
Yes,
And
that's exactly.
and so an insane person operating in the ordinary world is not a romantic or an evocative tale. But a sane person entering an insane world like Alice in Wonderland is a romantic and evocative tale.
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah, exactly, right, and that might be why young adult fiction is so much more popular. Right?
And also Lord of the Rings. If you look at
guys, one at a time, please.
If you look at Frodo and Sam, the hobbits are supposed to basically be the most ordinary of ordinary folk, and then they go off in this massive adventure.
Yeah, so there is some elements, the form of the modern novel has really been in crisis since the modernists, since the existentialists. I think the existentialist authors and the early modernists, like Joyce himself, I really like Joyce. I mean, I'm sure Coach Redpill has much more to say about him than I do, since I've only read 2 of his books, and they were both early ones. But I thought he was a brilliant writer. But after you got through the modernists, after you got through sort of this stark perspective on reality, and you get into the existentialists, where you sort of question all normative views on the universe, you end up with a view of contemporary fiction which is really, really hard for ordinary people to digest. You go to the non-young adult fiction section of bookstores. I mean, something like, for instance, and this is a good book, don't get me wrong, Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. I mean, 90% of the people in this world aren't going to be able to pick that up and make heads or tails out of what he's really getting at. I mean, it's too crazy. It's too sort of wacky.
It's too plagiarized. It's basically a cheap copy of Gravity's Rainbow. I've never quite understood why everybody, thinks that novel is such a good novel. It's
that mixed with the Monty Python joke about an infinitely funny joke that kills people.
I just don't. Yeah, exactly. I don't quite understand. I mean, everybody likes David Foster Wallace as a person. And so they ascribe to his writing a profundity that it doesn't actually have, especially his fiction. His nonfiction, some of it is very good, but his fiction is kind of, just bad copies of Pynchon and whatchamacallit, this guy, William Gass. So I don't quite understand, the significance of it. But anyway.
Yeah, I guess everyone liked David Foster Wallace as a person, except for David Foster Wallace in the end. But yeah, I see what you're saying. But I think I didn't really mean, I was just pulling him out of the hat, right?
Okay.
I think I just wanted to use him as an example. I think that if you went back and looked at Charles Dickens, right? That was adult fiction, and most of the people in Victorian England could read that and get something out of it. I don't think most people in our contemporary age could read David Foster Wallace or anyone. I don't pick somebody else. Like, I don't want to say, any of the major fiction writers that are recognized as being like great writers of our time, right?
No, it's what's happened is that fiction has become completely divorced from reality because of the industry of fiction, of who gets to pick it, and it's become a serious fiction. It has become an issue of what do you call this when it's a show to show that you're so smart? It's
meta.
Intellectualism at its best.
Yeah, basically, it's like take Infinite Jest for instance. I mean, when it came out in '96, right? I was old enough to pick it up and read it, and I thought it was garbage. And it was garbage because it was just so obviously ripping off Thomas Pynchon. Okay, I gone through a Thomas Pynchon period when I was like 19. 20. You're supposed to, right? Anyway, I just thought it was garbage, and everybody's saying that it was the greatest thing ever, and everybody carrying around a copy of the book, but the spines were unbroken, right? Which is a fucking clue. It was just a virtue signal or an intellectual signal. Oh, I'm so smart, I'm reading this guy. And so much of modern fiction is that. So much of modern fiction is just pretending to an intellectuality. And it's just so much garbage because it doesn't talk about the current human experience. Now, I think that, for instance, Breaking Bad, especially the first couple of seasons, talked more about the current scene and our current life experience than anything being published today. And that's why it was so popular, especially, initially it touched a nerve in people. I mean, later it got a little weird, but
Breaking Bad was supremely moralistic in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
people described it as literally like Old Testament,
Yeah, Dickensian, if you will. But the point I'm trying to make here is that contemporary fiction has become completely divorced from people. That's why it's so unpopular. You have genre fiction, that is extremely popular and sells quite a bit, but the literary highfalutin, quote unquote, high literature is just nonsense because it doesn't touch people. It has become just a virtue signal of people's intellectuality, as opposed to anything that actually reflects the reality that we are perceiving. The best writers don't write literary fiction. The best writers write TV.
I don't think that's true. And I don't think that's true, if only because I read evidently weirdly obscure shit. Look, it's not so much that good writers aren't writing fiction. It's that Game of Thrones gets optioned to an HBO show, and therefore Game of Thrones was good fiction. Like, that is our metric now for what is good fiction.
No.
If someone options it.
I didn't mean in that regard. I said that a good writer, rather than devote his time writing the great American novel, he's not going to do that. He's going to turn his career towards writing for television.
Well, so, and that's what I mean, is you can argue chicken and egg here all you want, but regardless, what we have come to is...
I'm not talking chicken and egg. I'm talking that a writer today, an emerging writer who's a strong writer, a young guy who knows what he's doing, he's not going to write novels. He's going to turn over and write for television. He's going to go to Hollywood, go to Century City, as opposed to going to New York. The mediocre writers go to New York. The good writers go to Century City.
Again, I don't think that's true. Though, to be fair, I go out of my way to read small writers. So, again, my view may be tainted because... maybe I should just put on my fedora now for this discussion, but regardless, I enjoy reading small writers because they're small writers and occasionally they have great series. But regardless, there are a few small fiction writers, and I do have my preferred genres that I read, but and they're all very dorky. But regardless, they do write good work, and I regularly find that a lot of the problem is that their good work does not adapt to television very well, because a lot of what they write that is so well demands my imagination. They do not fill in imagination-based gaps. There's not 8,000 words of description of some mystical effect or something like that. It's this sort of thing happens, and here's some vague guidelines of how it happens. So explain it yourself in your mind, as all great fiction writers always have. That we don't cherish these writers anymore may be a problem, but them not existing is not a thing.
That's a good point. One thing about all of this is about fiction writers and how to to separate stuff. It's it's what people want, though. I mean, that's the thing. It's easy to say, oh, you can write for a small niche audience, but the majority of people don't want to live in that hard reality of reality. And once you do have something of that reality come in, they reject it hard. So,
usually.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's the sad part.
Well, actually, that's not true, because what's happened is, for instance, you see the explosion of terrific nonfiction writing, where people are reporting on fairly horrifying things, and they are achieving bestseller status. For example, Michael Lewis wrote about the 2008 global financial crisis, The Big Short. and that novel, that rather nonfiction piece, rather, did exceptionally well. I mean, it did really, really well, and it's a very complex subject. Now, Lewis is a fine writer, but he's not the greatest writer ever. You know, he is a very capable writer who very capably described a very interesting subject in a mainstream way, and it succeeded. It succeeded very well. But the thing is, see, fiction writers, none of them are touching that particular subject, the global financial crisis. To give just one example, they're not touching something that actually affected people, because what's happened is that the publishing industry has become a cathedral that doesn't really publish things that most people are interested in. They publish things, in fiction at least, they publish things that are academic and airless, that are sort of like divorced from the human experience. For instance, a novel like The Hours would be published and win the Pulitzer Prize, and nobody really likes it. Go ahead.
I think on the other hand, though, I think you had a good point there that really good fiction, the thing that I think a lot of fiction writers, either they go into that, or I think a lot of them just go into genre fiction like science fiction and fantasy, because they don't really want to touch the reality we live in. Because you could create, because like I still need to read it, but I know the premise of War and Peace is it's set, you know, it was written a number of years after the Napoleonic Wars, but it would have been written in a time in which people would have still been around, that would have known that conflict and how it affected their lives.
Actually, I do believe it was written 50 years after.
Coach, can I ask what time frame you're talking in? Because maybe you're just talking in a more modern context than I am. Maybe you're talking like the last 5 years. Is that what you mean?
Well, the last 20 years, but yeah. Sure.
Well, in that case, can I point out like one rather specific exception, to be fair, and equally to be fair, the guy did have to write like a 10-book series to make it happen. But the Sword of Truth series is an entire book series that is completely fictional, based entirely around the idea of there being magic. And the main character is just pretty much a righteous dude. And book 6 of that series, of which name I completely forget, but someone I'm sure in chat will correct me because it's a popular enough series. But regardless, book 6 of that series is the battle between capitalism and socialism socialism losing in the end. I mean,
I'm not very interested in the plot. I'm interested in what is the point that you're trying to make.
Well, so you're arguing that people aren't arguing modern day concepts, and the idea of whether or not socialism or communism can defeat capitalism is a pretty modern day concept.
No, what I'm arguing is that the modern publishing industry has become divorced from what people are interested in. That's what I'm arguing. And that's why you see very little fiction that touches people's lives.
Well, so, and I think citing an example in contrary to that is relevant.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, you yourself said that it took him 6 or 10 novels. I'm unclear as to which you were referring to in terms of the length of time it took him to actually sort of like break into a minor mainstream appeal, because you know the larger publishing companies just weren't giving him that outlet, right?
So can I break in here with
sure.
With something? So I have sort of an unpopular series opinion video that I still haven't gotten to yet, and one of the unpopular opinions, by far one of the most popular unpopular opinions, was I said this. I said, you know, most modern people who almost exclusively consume sci-fi or fantasy don't actually really like sci-fi or fantasy in the classic sense. They're not reading it to encounter some novel form of magic or some innovative view of the future. What they like is romantic stories of heroism. And for some reason, the modern mind just can't imagine romantic human stories taking place in the realistic modern world. You know, in the 19th century, you would have had cowboy stories or explorer stories. I mean, these were obviously ridiculous in some sense, but they took place in the near contemporary world. But no one can imagine, or we have a very difficult time imagining, stories that are kind of have heroic dimensions to them and take place in the realistic world.
I think maybe perhaps that says less about people's fears of writing in the the modern contemporary setting, but something deeply wrong with our contemporary society, that it seems that there's no room for, you know, actual heroism, that it seems like it's looked down upon for somebody to try and be a heroic individual. I mean, I suppose you have sports, you know, athletic stories of like great sports heroes, but it doesn't, in no way compares to, like, you know, I don't know, the Cowboys or any like anything written by Jules Verne.
Fritz, I would agree. I think it has to do with the fact that you know, sports heroism, for instance, is just athletic performance. Okay, I object to calling somebody who can score a touchdown or throw a three-point basketball a hero. But our contemporary culture frowns upon people who take a definitive stand, because by taking a definitive stand, it is anti-commercial. That which is anti-commercial in our current society, that which loses an audience for you, that which will make people not like you because you are taking a particular stand on a particular issue, well, that is frowned upon in the modern marketplace. And that's why Jon Stewart is popular, because he doesn't stand for anything. He just throws shit at people. And therefore, that's the point. It's anti-heroic for that reason, that if you stand for something, you lose market share. So better not stand for anything and therefore gain market share.
I would actually disagree a bit there, because I think the modern world does have a sort of idea of heroes, but they're progressive heroes. But, you know, saying, oh, look, I'm gay does not really make you into an actual hero, because you haven't actually done anything.
Can I
go ahead?
Can I suggest that of all people, Obama summed this up, that we are the generation of you didn't build this yourself, right? Whether or not any of us individually agree with that, seemingly culturally we kind of do. So like the sports hero thing is a great analogy, if only because you could be a great compliment to a team, but you didn't win that on your own. You couldn't have done it without the whole team. So we're willing to accept a good quarterback because he's a part of a team, but he definitely didn't do it on his own.
And I think a broader part of the sports culture, though, isn't it interesting that the only acceptable, you know, again, calling them heroes, I don't think is very true, but the only area where we think this sort of violent heroism is acceptable is within these very, very constrained boundaries of the sports field.
Yeah, that is really disturbing, you know, about that. And by the way, as the only black guy here and such, you know, surprise. It is something, really is like, you know, the athlete seems to be the acceptable hero, or the acceptable role for some people, and something like that. But I believe is that heroism should not be from the gridiron or strength. It could be, you know, wit and being clever. Like, I mean, think about, well, our other heroes, like say Malcolm X. For me, Malcolm X or Marcus Garvey or Martin Luther King. They weren't strong physical people who beat the crap out of you. No, they had, you know, groups and foundations to change that type of to change society. To me, that's more braver. You know,
they were leaders, right?
They were leaders,
yeah.
And
men really need a strong role model too, which is why I think the purpose of the hero, right?
Yeah, and by the way, the hero
men in particular need hero images.
Yeah,
this is something that modern society just does not acknowledge. And by the way, if anyone's wondering, the reason why my icon is half and half Catholic Once Distributist is we were originally planning on using one microphone, but then switched to two. So I happen to have both. But sorry, yeah, I think men in particular need sort of the strong masculine role model, and maybe that's one of the reasons why the lack of it. I mean, Homer Simpson is sort of the image of masculinity of the modern era more than anything else I can think of.
Him and Sheldon Cooper.
Sorry for bursting in, rather. Excuse me, but I do have to go because they're calling me here for breakfast, and so
okay.
Yes, eat the breakfast. That's
okay. Thanks for coming by, Coach.
But I want to thank you all, and Distributist. Congratulations on 10,000 subs. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I plan someday to not leave you hanging with your live streams. Thanks for the invites as always, and I'm sure we'll talk in the future.
Okay, take it easy, and so long to everybody here.
Adios.
Peace.
Meeting you.
Yeah.
Bye.
That kind of segues us back into nerd culture. By the way, I have a super chat to read. This is really old. I am obligated to read this. Larry Steele says, "All Jews go to heaven." I guess. Lol. Okay, Larry. I appreciate that you're stamping shekels with the JQ and throwing them at me. I will proceed to pick your shekels up and read the JQ questions on them. I don't have any answers though. That's not my department, as Werner von Braun said. So anyway,
once I'm learning Chinese.
Okay.
Just say, well, just do what most people say. Thanks for the money, and no answer the question. I don't know what you're talking about. Take it. Just take the money and leave. That's the answer to all of these. So, and yeah. And as someone who is a consumption of the culture, you know, because I was raised in the culture of mixture of Star Wars and in the modern myth making of all these things. It's not like we should take them away or just say that's because I don't think it's impossible. I think it's impossible to cut that out entirely because there's always going to be a need for stories and a need for these fiction stuff. But my worry is you see something like which I told you in Discord, you're gonna love this movie. Ready Player One is that we get so immersed in diversity that we just go into these virtual worlds.
Whoa!
We go to these.
Don't. So look, as a guy who's gotten way too excited over books becoming movies in the past, I will support Ready Player One after I see it. And literally not 1 second before, because that book had dozens of angles of meaning, was great storytelling, was well written, at least modernly speaking.
Well, not for me.
The moment that we convert it to a movie, it's going to go straight to hell.
Very rarely do books ever make good movies.
Lord of the Rings, say hi.
Lord of the Rings, though, yeah, again, that was probably the best they could have done.
Well, there are a few books out there where the movies are better than the actual
The
books.
Exorcist made an excellent movie.
Silence did as well.
And also, you could say The Godfather.
The Godfather is a better movie than it is a book.
Yeah, that's
I thought it's arguably. Someone going to defend The Godfather of the books?
The Godfather is a better movie than it is a book, as long as you discount the prequels.
You mean Godfather Part 2?
No, I mean there are 2 books prior to the book The Godfather, and they are better stories than either the movie or the book of The Godfather.
Reactionary Expat says Silence of the Lambs. That might indeed be a better movie than a book too.
That's true. I'll just go with that
prequels. I think I can make another comment about Star Wars. Is that when you say distributors, like the same thing about how the new movies are like trying to both simultaneously replace the, reject the baby boomer past, but then try and copy it again. You also think about it that a huge number of the people that are Star Wars fans are people in their 20s and 30s who they try and like. It seems like they're trying to assert that they grew up with the Star Wars movies, no, you'd have to be in your mid to late 40s in order to be able to have seen the original Star Wars movies when it was in theaters. So they're trying to say Star Wars was their childhood, which they probably saw, like I did, the movies when they were on video at home, but like they didn't. They grew up in Star Wars after it was a well-established franchise,
But does that make it not part of the? I mean, everyone here probably has the Wizard of Oz as part of their childhood, but no one alive ever saw
somewhere over the rainbow.
Right?
Well, the difference though is I don't consider the Wizard of Oz. I don't consider the Wizard of Oz to be to be my lifestyle as some people act with Star Wars.
Well, it's not.
I guess I don't understand how a movie is part of your childhood or not, depending on whether you were alive when it premiered in the theaters, I guess.
Well,
but go ahead.
So this is a cultural time frame, get off my lawn kind of argument. Not to boil it down to nothing, but my name is Pleb, so that's what I do. But I mean, the reality is, I was born 1 year after Return of the Jedi was released, so certainly it's not my generation of movie. But it doesn't mean when I was a child I didn't enjoy them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was lucky. I managed to enjoy the. Now this is gonna take us away, but like I managed to enjoy the movies as I think they should have been, which was we had the nice video box sets, so before George Lucas ruined them further.
Oh yeah.
Oh, don't worry, you can find the other old stuff there. It's always there.
I mean, what?
The stream gets demonetized. It wasn't all the crazy stuff. It was just that mention of that.
I love the Redletter Media discussion about Star Wars where they have the box set and it's like on the back George Lucas even makes a veiled threat that this is the last time you'll be able to get the original Star Wars on VHS.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean,
he wasn't kidding.
Well, some of it was decent, but I think looking at that, there is heroes out there, and you have to look and see what they're, I look and say, for example, the way the Marvel movies have done Captain America. For all their things, he is basically, someone say he doesn't stand for it. He does stand for truth. And
well, for my I think I'm going to discuss this a little bit in my my series on nerd culture, and this is sort of I think what a lot of people are dealing with is exactly these properties like Star Wars and Marvel and Star Trek and Magic the Gathering and all of these Dungeons and Dragons and all of these things that people live for, right? Every video game you've ever played, these are corporate intellectual properties. And when old people put their faith in heroes like Siegfried or St. George or Jack the Giant Slayer or Finn McCool, they were referencing folk properties, things that were owned by their ancestors and that were handed down to them by people who wanted the best for their people and for their descendants. And there's sort of a trust there. And anyone could make stories of those people and anyone could tell, and maybe you told a bad Finn McCool story, it just wouldn't survive to the next generation, right? But now these worlds, and they enforce this through continuity to a large extent, they're owned by corporations that have their own interests at heart. Mm-hmm. And because of that, you literally have, and this is, you're sort of seeing this in the NFL a little bit, right? Where you have these cultural properties that are being essentially supported by a population. And it's really obvious that the owner and the people who essentially have these as corporate assets despise the people that they're selling to.
Well,
and you see this in Marvel, and you see this in all of these modern nerd wars over the SJWs coming into space. They don't care.
Can I make a general suggestion about how much corporate culture doesn't matter in this sense?
You don't think it matters?
I really don't. And let me reference every single one of those places that you just mentioned. When the NFL was, regardless of prompting from the U.S. government, but they decided a long time ago they were going to sell patriotism, right? And yes, to be fair, they got paid from the U.S. government for a long time to do it.
Yeah.
But fact of the matter is they said, America, football, America. And that was what they sold. Mm-hmm. And the moment they turned away from that, the fan base shunned them like it was cool.
Well, I'm going to step in as a fan of the NFL. Sure. It's been a long time coming. The reasons why people don't watch the NFL is pretty much, they ran into what do most things, like in any civilization, any popular thing, what happens? They overextend. They become too big and they collapse on itself. That's what happened in the NFL.
I'll put it this way. Adidas Sarkeesian is going to be cutting checks very soon from corporate America. The current sex abuse, the sexual harassment crisis that's occurred in Hollywood has now virtually guaranteed that they're going to be bringing people, if not Anita Sarkeesian herself, people exactly like her. They're going to be bringing them into the studio to actually go over their hiring practices and also their content production. The corporate apparatus is going to literally employ people, and it'll be a cold day in hell before any corporation or entertainment body cuts someone like Sargon of Akkad a check for anything.
Can I suggest?
Understand that Sargon of Akkad, that they need to have a certain type of thinker on their side. Yeah, sorry, there was a long spiel. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries, man. Can I suggest that is a intensely short-term view of this, and even to the NFL point, right? So this is why I'm saying this. Yes, it has been a long time coming. They just crossed the threshold. No one ever ruins their brand in a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marvel didn't do it. The NFL didn't do it. DC didn't do it. Magic the Gathering didn't do it. Everybody went, we're going to stretch the boundaries. We're going to stretch harder. Let's see how many more people we can include. And at a certain point, it was, we're including everyone, and half the population dropped off.
Well,
and it's just the bubble growth that eventually results in a loss. And it happens to every corporate industry that engages in this. And in the world of sports, you can go right on back to boxing.
So to clarify
how ridiculous this is.
So to clarify your position, if I understand it, you're saying that the trend towards progressivism in almost extensively across all of these entertainment corporations, be they sports or nerd culture, you're saying that this is more the effect of sort of a housing bubble type dynamic than it is sort of Conquest's second law playing out.
I mean, that almost seems like a pedantic difference, but yeah.
I mean, I actually would have to disagree. I don't think it's that they're trying to include everybody. It's now that it's both the fact that, you know, when they make every Marvel superhero now a black gay woman, they're excluding their core fan base. But the thing is that they don't care, because their fan base poses less of a threat to them than the progressive establishment, because the progressive establishment can sue the fuck out of these people. Sorry, excuse my language, but whereas their fan base can't. If the NFL were to completely turn around and say, we condemn these protests and the kneeling and all of that, how long would it be before you saw a lawsuit coming?
Well, so be that as it may, look at ratings differences right now, which would be better for the NFL.
The thing is, though, that
if they got sued under this pretense, what do you think would happen? NFL tickets would soar. One, because all the people who disagree with this shit, even if they didn't like the NFL, again, sorry for the language, but even if they didn't generally enjoy the NFL, would be like, I'm buying season tickets now, even if they never went to a game. So the fact of the matter is, at worst, it would balance out equilibrium, but they would still be pandering to their fan base, so they would keep, and in the NFL's case, that's a lot of money, they would still keep a huge majority of money. They just wouldn't be branching out into new sectors to gain, quote, new fans who don't actually care about this. They're just there for the progressive agenda.
I have 2 points on this. Is that, first off, there's a very sort of big reason why the NFL is not suffering the way people keep saying it is, or why they're not as worried, is because there is not a competition for them. There is no alternate. They have a monopoly over football outside of maybe college football, which I suppose you could argue is.
No, I'm going to disagree with you right there, and I'm going to throw out boxing, soccer, and well, you know what? I'll just go boxing or not soccer. Jesus, boxing and baseball in the short term.
Bobby, soccer was a sport invented by European ladies.
Yeah, no, soccer doesn't count. That was an entire misspeak. That didn't happen.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. Go ahead, keep on going.
Oh, I guess. Okay.
I'm sorry, Fritz.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I think it was me, though. I think.
You?
The other issue is that. Oh no, I just forgot now what it was. But hold on, let me see if I can remember it. That about this is that I think that I suppose if we're going to attribute to them being a bit more diabolical, is that I think a lot of the progressives know that doing this, attaching themselves and effectively acting as parasites to the NFL, this helps them, because I think they want to see the NFL destroyed, I think.
Yes.
Because if it's supposed to represent another mainstream middle America, if that's another thing that they can take away, it's a similar thing with this and with the whole Confederate statues. This is what the progressives love doing is cultural terrorism of being able to, they want to be able to demonstrate their power by saying we can take anything away from middle America that we want, and there's nothing they can do to stop us.
Totally agreed. Now my argument against that there is nothing to replace football is that in 1920 there was nothing to replace boxing. In 1940 there was nothing to replace baseball. In 2017 there is nothing to replace football. Now, this may be, again, the anti-Luddite argument, but the Luddites have still remained wrong, as did all the people who said there was nothing who could replace boxing. So while we may revert to NASCAR in 5 years and I'll be drinking moonshine, the reality is there will always be something else. The middle America manhood, for the sake of manhood, doing hard things makes you right. Sport will always be there no matter what it is, even if what we have to do is invent a sport that involves pitching rocks at each other from 100 yards away.
Of course,
Like,
the other,
it'll be there.
of course, the other
What
issue,
I don't understand, though, two plebs, is how does this explain just the amount of conquest that's sort of gone on, where sort of these institutions are sort of mechanisms for progressive forces just being able to broadside traditional or middle American or even middle brow European communities with progressive messaging. That's sort of what's missing from your theory, I guess, right?
No,
is this going to be run? Are we going to use? I feel like constantly running away from. We build our lives around certain intellectual properties.
Absolutely.
And, we grew up with Star Wars in a very real way. We grew up with Wizard of Oz in a very real way. The problem is that Wizard of Oz and Star Wars are owned by corporations.
Can I suggest the answer is the reason we don't need monopoly laws? And boy, is that you want to talk about unpopular opinions.
Ooh, yeah, that's going to be fun. I know a guy who would love to talk to you about that, but
Teddy Roosevelt.
Let me give you the shorthand. Right.
Welcome, Reactionary Expat.
Right.
Hello.
Oh, hey, welcome to the party. So the shorthand: you're allowed to get big. You're allowed to get eminently big. You're allowed to be the NFL, where you're the biggest thing that's ever been, just like boxing and baseball before them. And then you're allowed to make mistakes and fail. And that's what we're seeing happen with the NFL, is they've decided they were so big they couldn't make mistakes. They've decided they were so big that their job was to reach 100% of everybody, and it didn't matter what their core product was. Now they have to get 100% of the market share. And the reach for 100%, the reach for too much, is always what makes corporations fail. And it is right at that moment that competitor that you didn't care about, that one from a different industry, they come up, they reach up, and they knock you off the throne. And it's happened historically every single time, and it doesn't matter what the market is.
Unless you're Brendan Eich.
Where? What are we talking about?
He was this. I don't know. Maybe if this is a bit of a stretch, but it seems like if you're a conservative, you start standing out. There's ways that they can hammer you down. Like Brendan Eich was the CEO of Firefox, and when it came out that he had donated money to oppose gay marriage, they effectively forced him to stand down. And the same thing happened to the guy that was the CEO of Papa John's, John Shatner. He was forced to resign as well after he criticized the NFL protests.
well, let's
so
be honest.
I don't think that contradicts the point, right? Yeah. So like maybe they just should have stuck to doing whatever the hell they did. Now, to be fair, with the guy from Firefox, I mean, how he privately donates money, that's probably irresponsible crucifixion on behalf of the public. People should be able to donate money however they want.
Well, apparently
but if you're going to stand up with your brand and say my brand doesn't like this thing, then your brand suffers the consequences.
So I guess maybe I missed this. So you're saying we don't have enough competition to keep these to stop the progressive messaging in these?
We certainly do. There is just a reality that we tolerate X quantity of progressive influence, we'll say, before we abandon a thing. Now,
well, so far what we have is, I mean, I'm to incorporate this into Fritz's complaint. I'm literally broadcasting this via a browser called Brave, which is developed by Brendan Eich when he fled or was kicked out of Mozilla.
Yeah, no, I love Brave.
This is, but I don't know. This is a pattern of just a constant fleeing from like conservatives come in, they build an institution and then they flee from it, and then progressives take it over. I mean, is that the pattern we're establishing? It doesn't sound like a winning pattern to me.
Well, that is a sad truth of a free market, right? So
that sounds. I mean, that may be a free market. That sounds like a losing battle.
Well, so it is just a recycling battle. And let's take the example given. Firefox was created. It became too progressive of an institution to support someone donating to, what did he donate to? Opposing gay marriage?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So it became too progressive of an institution to have a CEO who said, you know what, I'm just not in favor of gay marriage. So he left and he created a browser and he said, hey, look, just the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what you do. This is a browser. We don't track you, which, by the way, is a great selling point of Brave. And I'm going to sell this. Now, it's his job to ensure his company doesn't become a progressive sinkhole, we'll say courteously. If he doesn't do that, he suffers the consequences of his actions.
Can I say a couple of things here?
Sure. Yes, please.
So the first one I think is, I think there's a generational divide here. There are all these old guys around who keep getting caught out by these progressive lynch mobs because they're sort of playing by the old rules. They think that the system is inherently fair somehow and everyone's going to see that. But I think with younger people on the right, they realize that leftists are not going to play fair against them. And so they have a completely different attitude towards all of this. The second thing I would say is that I think in terms of pop culture, like movies, for instance, they're marketed increasingly towards international audiences. And it might be ironic that the pushback against all this kind of stuff is going to come from the Chinese market just rejecting all of these crazy things in movies, all of this weird social agenda. They're just going to say, what's that about? But I don't want to watch that movie. That might be the thing that really topples these guys.
I think on the other hand, you could also, similar to that reactionary, is that as these companies seem to be marketing more and more towards particularly the Chinese market, is like in that movie Rogue One. Even though I really liked that movie, you could tell that the two Asian characters were there almost specifically so that it would appeal more to the Chinese audience. And if that trend continues and movies you see movies with more and more Chinese actors and Chinese culture in them, you're going to then suffer like a total alienation of their Western audiences, which I suppose that'd be interesting. But I think the other problem, though, is that when you said to plebs that there's a certain level of tolerance that we have for progressive ideas, the thing, if you notice, though, is that what's happened over the past several decades is that tolerance builds up slowly and more and more and more. And so people have now been conditioned to tolerate huge amounts of progressivism nobody would have accepted 20 years ago.
Sure.
And I think that the job, or I think that the sort of stand of the, I suppose, people that are anti-progressive is that, well, actually enough is enough. We don't want to keep accepting this system where every bit of culture is corrupted by the progressives and you sort of have to deal with it.
Can I refute both of those points in one argument?
I suppose, sure.
I'm sorry. Dude with the Lamb, whose name I don't know, should definitely say something.
Oh yeah, that's just David Cedarwood, and it's a goat. Just saying. Well, I would say, yeah, sort of a well, it's a joke, don't worry. But sort of to go along with this, I think what people are saying is, yes, new competitors will come in, but progressives will keep their cultural power by just taking over the new ones, and we'll just, as Fritz just said, we'll be conditioned to accept more and more progressivism. So it's still a losing battle for us. We're just seeing their advance gets halted when they go too far, but they're still the only ones advancing in this battle.
And I think the reason why for all this, and by the way, it's interesting that I somehow got into a live stream with not only Coach Red Pill but David Cedarwood. That's very interesting.
I thought John Tron would show up.
Yeah, before that,
everyone is welcome in this magical kingdom.
Are we writing our own fiction novel?
Oh, yes. And I'm gonna make this point, and I'm gonna log off because it's like, Jesus, 2:50 right now. I need to get some sleep. I gotta take the Christmas tree down, tomorrow. So I'm gonna say this point, and I'll leave. The one thing I'll say is that the reason why I believe the progressive thing keeps going is because I think it's a mix of like empathy and looking at what the right is. It's the fear of like they just like they see people like, oh, the conservatives, they just want things to stay the same, and they fear that, not just modernity but also stagnation. That's the one thing a society can and will die of if everything just stays the same for moderate of time. And progressiveness, well, is like a necessary evil. And I think that's how progressive ideas continue to grow, because people are going to look at them and say, hey, this is something that is progressing society forward. We don't want to be a stagnant society. We don't want to be a society that is just going to be like, well, we're just going to be this way forever.
It could be a declining society instead.
Well, so I think this is where we get into the culture war discussion. But
and I just get out the right time. Anyways, race talk.
See you later, man. See you later.
Peace.
And Charles is like, I'm done with that.
Peace. Like Bunty King, man. After all the crowd stuff, he got out the right time. So that I'm doing too. Peace.
Have a good night, man.
Night.
Who's Kraut?
I thought that was a serious question for a moment.
Oh wow! Let's just answer that question.
Did somebody call my name? Sorry.
Something onto something.
I think though. I think that's one of the. I think that's sort of the elephant in the room reactionary, is that I think a lot of us here, you, me, distributist, probably we do actually see this. The idea that this progressive stuff is going to continue indefinitely is no. I think we are not in a stable, sustainable society right now. We are definitely in a declining civilization.
I agree entirely, and people are rejecting it. I mean, people. What are who is watching all of this television? Who's watching all of these movies? People are turning away from it. There are lots of young white men in particular just turning away from this stuff. It means nothing to them. They're turning away from professional sports, everything, because they're saying they recognize inherently all of the social justice agenda that's been adopted even by corporations. And they say, well, what does it have to do with me? If anything, it's bad for me. I'm not going to partake of any of that.
I think reactionary, actually, I want to kind of repost off that. We kind of started with this channel going like, oh, we're too pessimistic. It's not leading anywhere. But I think I'll say this about pessimism, right? To the person who's entrepreneurial minded, every problem is an opportunity, right? And that's how I see it, right? If you're indeed right that people are turning away from these things, if we were to sort of switch it around, maybe there's an opportunity here for the seeds of something else to be planted.
Absolutely.
I totally second that as hard as possible. I wouldn't have a channel if I didn't believe that.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I like the most about having a channel is the people who contact me and tell me all sorts of stuff. I had a guy the other day who contacted me to tell me that he knows a whole lot of guys who think this way, and he's doing positive things. He's doing all sorts of farming and this kind of stuff. And people are starting to build communities. Maybe they're not out in the open yet, but they're building communities. I mean, the number of young guys of university age who are just itching for something, and they're just waiting to be led, essentially.
I would kill for a reactionary version of the open software community.
Oh my God.
I love that community, but I mean, it's a little bit replete with the SJW type.
They are yet another example of something that started out on a serious principle and got filled with progressives. Go read Linus Torvalds in the early days of him establishing open source. He was ruthless, and he has become somewhat silent lately and refuses to attend cons.
He got shoved into a corner. I mean,
Yeah.
the name GitHub, right, was a name for himself, and because he was a Git, he saw himself as an open sexist, right, and he mocked that. No one can touch me. I'm the leader of this. But he's gotten shoved in the corner by this. I know Reactionary Expat has done an entire video on. Well, I don't know if how knowledgeable you are about this, but you reference it in one of your videos about the decline of GitHub into sort of an ideological space when it was sort of previously a developmental space. I don't know where this is going, but I can't really make heads or tails out of it, I guess. Everyone knows something new needs to come, but no one knows the shape of it, I guess.
Can I suggest an ironic problem that we have? Which is to say that we are holding on to very classical ideals, as it were, despite being conservatives, classical liberal, almost, as it were, ideals, even though I absolutely despise that term. But we're holding on to, those Enlightenment values. We're pushing those sorts of things. Open source is very appealing to all of us, but we have to be faster. We have to adapt quicker than they do. We need to abandon the idea, effectively, of intellectual property to even get a handle on this, because intellectual property is what is giving them a hold on us right now.
I'll second that. Go ahead, Expat.
Well, I think that young people are. I think that this kind of way of thinking is old thinking. I mean, I'm 41, almost 42, so I'm a Gen Xer, and the average Gen Xer they still imagine the world to be the 1990s, but these guys who are Generation Z or even some millennials, they've grown up amongst the rot. The world in which I grew up was this sort of idyllic fantasy land by today's standards, but these guys have grown up amongst the ruins of a civilization, and so I don't think they have any pretenses about all this. I think these guys are primed for this.
I mean, I think I don't want to plug myself here, but I sort of said in a video once of like one of my theories of why I think there's a difference between younger millennials is that the first political memory I really have is 9/11. Like my childhood thinking politically was not, oh, what did Slick Willie President Bill Clinton do this time? It was, we're at war again. There's, Muslims flying planes into buildings. You're absolutely right that I think the fact that this new generation is growing up, as you said, in, I wouldn't say the ruins, but the decay has started.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually really.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I just say one thing? That's actually a really good point, the bit about 9/11, because I was 13 when the Berlin Wall came down, and so all of my teenage years were, then the Soviet Union collapsed 2 years later, and we'd arrived at the end of history, and it was all this, and there was this sort of immense optimism that we'd solved every problem. That was sort of the defining moment of my generation, and all these people are still living in the past, like it's 1991 and the Soviet Union has collapsed and we're all going to ride off into the sunset. It's not like that.
You could say a lot about that, like about the new atheists, especially of they a lot of them, the people like Sargon, growing up in the late 80s and 90s, and you even have T.J. Kirk saying on apparently the National Star Trek days, here's hoping we get rid of tradition and embrace like a scientific future and reason. It's like they really see, a lot of them seem to really think that, if you get rid of religion, that the sort of natural course of history is the beautiful and brighter future of Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation. It's just anything that's holding back is just these backwards religious Neanderthals and their silly beliefs. But the problem is that 9/11 and the past 17, almost 18 years now, right? Shouldn't that be a massive, thorn in their side?
They kind of think
it should be, but it kind of hasn't yet. Right. Yeah. This is my big pushback, is that I've heard you say this about younger millennials being so shaped by 9/11, but I don't think that has really been the wake-up call that maybe it should have been. I just don't see it manifest.
I actually agree with you there.
Can I speak as a member of Gen Z?
Oh, go ahead.
From my experience as, probably the youngest person in the chat, I do find it odd that a lot of members of my generation almost I wouldn't say forget that 9/11 happened, but are desensitized to the fact that it did, and to the general aspect of terrorism altogether. They're not really threatened by this sort of thing that you're, this menace that you're describing. They don't really feel any call to arms necessarily. It's not a part of our lives.
But they have been influenced by that, because
Yeah, no,
I'm not saying that we haven't been. I'm just saying that it doesn't. I'm just saying that it hasn't,
what's there at an unconscious level
impacted us in a devastating way as it has y'all.
What was that?
You guys are so damaged. But, from my point of view, the way you guys
I don't
view
disagree.
the world,
Not at all.
you go back and watch these movies from or television shows from the 1990s, and they're quaint now with all of the look at something like Twin Peaks, the original series of Twin Peaks that came out in 91, I think. And it's like some sort of utopian white fantasy land, and all of the sort of conspiracy theories, the X-Files, all of this kind of stuff. I mean, it's laughable now compared to the actual reality on the grounds that people are living.
Maybe that's why something like Game of Thrones is because that's supposed to be like dealing with like global world events on a grand scale, not like this like small town murder mystery.
It also presents itself as gritty, so it flatters the audience.
And there's lots of TNA, of course.
Yeah, that too.
That never hurt anybody. Look, on television, that never hurt anybody.
Well, I guess what I'm waiting for is not the disillusionment, but the shape of the next step. And it just can't be a flight. It can't be that we build one outstanding open source company called Mozilla, fill it with SJWs, and then get kicked out of it. Only build a second outstanding open source company to perhaps get kicked out of that one, right? There has to be a different mechanism for advancing this, right?
Can I ask why not? Because growth isn't infinite, right? Like, in order for that to make sense, we'd have to be growing at an extraordinary rate. In ordinary, the growth rates we've seen in the 20th century, right? Like 5% growth. You could say, oh, we'll always be on the cusp. We'll always be flying, but we'll always be growing faster than the progressives. Therefore, we'll always be one step ahead. But in the modern age, we could be going back to pre-20th century growth rates. And at that level, the long-lasting institutions control most of society's power, not just new up-and-coming ones every 5 years. Can I argue that Rucka Ali violates that on a daily basis? Because that is a man who has had approximately 20-ish YouTube channels, is in fact fairly conservative, gets shut down, gets his channel closed, gets community guideline strikes over and over and over again, re-uploads his entire content base under a new channel name, and starts again once every couple of years.
He'd be a lot bigger if he didn't get shut down all the time. Though.
Probably, but he does have to live under the current motif, and he does.
Well, I think the point people are making is that they're winning the war of attrition in this manner. Like, yeah, they advance too far and they get beaten back, but they're still further than they were when they started. They're still taking over institutions.
But the contraction, they can only do that in a growing, expanding system. Once the system begins to contract, the process of contraction leads to a process of red pilling people, because they can no longer ignore that there's this cancer eating away at them. Then they're not outgrowing the cancer anymore.
You got it.
I hope so, and I agree. But even then, I think they're more organized than we are on that front. I mean, Antifa, they're pretty organized. So in a collapsing system, they'd see initial success.
Well, but they require constant converts, right? Because they don't have kids of their own. So I think a large part of this is for us to try to fly under the radar to a certain extent.
That's a good point.
Right? Have our own kids, build our own private institutions, and we win the war of attrition because these people have a fertility level of 0.8 and we have a fertility level of 3.0 or something.
Well, look,
in the same way we expect to win.
They're not going to be as infertile as they are.
Hold on. We're definitely not going to breed them out. This is not going to be like a prima nocta we win situation, right? We are going to actually have to win the battle of ideas. Our problem currently is exposure, But the reality of the situation is, are we arguing to win the battle, or are we arguing to win the war? And while we are going to lose thousands of battles along the way, as long as we are willing to fight the guerrilla tactic, as you know, if no one else wants to teach you, the Middle East and the US military will teach you, losing 1 billion battles, or Vietnam for that matter, but winning the war still means you win the war. Right?
The problem, though, is that for the past several, I suppose, decades, the conservatives have been not fighting a guerrilla war; they've been fighting an open war. Now, in the early stages, you know, at the beginning of the progressive complete domination in the 1960s, conservatism sort of had to fight that because it was still it was the dominant force in society. But now, I mean, the gay marriage was a perfect example of that. That was a completely and totally unwinnable battle, and yet conservatives still fought it, and it was an absolute disaster, you know, PR-wise for them. And whereas it would have been much easier had they just said, we still stand by our principles, but this is not a battle we're going to fight because we know we can't win.
Well, I'm not so
And
sure.
also-
I'm not sure that's possible, Fritz, right? Because how? I mean, gay marriage. This is, by the time gay marriage came up as an issue, the left knew they had struck gold. Because as you and I know, as religious conservatives can't walk away from marriage. It's something that we have to fight, and if they have a winning hand because of previous concessions made at a lower level in the argument, we're just going to take a loss. And that was, gay marriage was just the perfect storm.
But that's also a reason why the Vietnam example is a bit of a bad one, because the reason that worked out for the Viet Cong is they basically had domestic allies who made the war unpopular. So I kind of feel like you need to win the battle of ideas still, which I know Two Plebs said, but that's another missing thing. And that's the same with gay marriage. They already won the battle of ideas, so it's just a formality to get it passed.
Right. Well, so, and I think this is our problem, is that we're now fighting every battle as though, even if it's a Pyrrhic victory, we still won. But it's not. And we need to be, not to lean way too hard into things that I have said are not solely the issue, but to the distributist point of view in general, we need to win the culture war in the long haul, even if we lose gay marriage, even if we lose abortion, even if we lose whatever it is. All of these things can be returned in the long haul. Specifically, since we've adopted this idea of a what's it called, a changing constitution, an evolving constitution, right? Well, it evolved right back to where we said it was in the beginning. Deal with it, right? Yeah. So, like, even the idea, all of the things that they bring to bear against us eventually can be turned against them, which is not true of arguments that we make, right? So, like, what's the argument? As long as you go back to the regular constitution, you go back to the regular constitution. Well, shucks. I mean, so they have to fight their own ideology as well as ours over the long haul. We don't. So, yeah, it's going to suck in the short term. Yeah, it's going to be horrible. I'm not going to argue that it's not. But if we keep fighting only short-term battles and not the long haul, we will keep losing in the long haul.
I think, actually, I sort of think about this sort of totally differently, because I think that this is not a war. The way you're envisioning this is that this is us trying to take control, trying to battle over the current society we live in, even though this current society is the Titanic and it's sinking, as opposed to, I think, if you're going to, when I think of us trying to fight a guerrilla war, I think in terms of how this actually manifests itself, I'm thinking we should be more along the lines of actually trying to create a counterculture or a parallel culture alongside the decaying zombie civilization we live in.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Hold on. I won't disagree with that. I'm just saying that anything that is a short-term view is probably wrong because we've already lost the short-term fight. So your tactical method to get this to win, I agree with.
I think when you say, I agree with you there as well. So that if in terms of like conservatives in the short term fight have lost, certainly I think that might be the task of us, is how to convince other conservatives that that they actually have lost the culture war, because a lot of them still seem to. There's still the problem of believing that this, and I think Trump getting elected sort of will help this narrative a bit, which is that middle America moral majority still exists. I don't think that's true. I think, first off, demographically, that sort of demographic of white middle class America in the flyover country, that demographic has significantly shrunk over the past 50 years, and it will continue to shrink. But that is but the thing is, that culture is no longer the dominant in society, and I think a lot of conservatives, they think that any democratic victory, like democratic is in terms of the party, is just a minor setback, in that there's like this sort of bubbling silent majority that's always waiting under the surface, and oh look, Reagan got elected. That proved that all the hippies in the 60s and 70s were wrong. Trump got elected. It means all the SJWs were wrong. But the thing is, like, political victory doesn't mean you have won the culture war, but a lot of conservatives don't seem to understand that.
Yeah, there's still
I totally agree.
Younger people do. We may be at the point where the liberals have made all of the cultural gains that they can. Anyone who was going to become a liberal, who was going to be convinced by whatever they teach them in school or Hollywood or whatever.
Do you mean by liberal and
leftists? Okay. Leftists.
Yeah.
Anyone who was going to join that side, who was going to be convinced by those arguments, has already gone over, and those who remain have become inoculated, if you like, and those people are having more children. And as long as those people can try to become successful in their own lives and help each other and provide role models for other people, then they can win the war of attrition, because all of this other thing outside of that is going to collapse in on itself. They're already eating themselves into each other. There's no long-term sustainability. So
yeah, but I think
what's hold the line.
I think that I agree with you there, and I think, again, as I said, what would be needed for conservatives is to start trying to create a parallel society with parallel institutions, and basically say we don't exist in that same sort of American classically liberal culture anymore. That's not something that's not really our civilization anymore. I feel like for me, sort of, I would say, calling myself a reactionary as well, is the idea that sort of abandoning the sort of great modern American project. But the other thing is that as I absolutely do think that progressives are going to lose in the end, because they're taking control of a sinking ship, unless we can develop replicators from Star Trek so we don't have any scarcity anymore. But the other issues, of course, demographically, I think a conservative Christian counterculture needs to be built before Muslims basically breed out the rest of society, because go ahead, sorry.
No worries, man. Look, if that's what we're banking on, God, we're in trouble. Because I'm perfectly willing to accept communism the exact moment that we have replicators and infinite power. And literally at that moment, I think communism is a great idea. And I do mean infinite and replicators, precisely as defined in Star Trek. Because at that point, communism makes sense.
That's not really the point, though. The point, I said that because of the fact that
he's saying we're running out of let's keep it as going.
I know, but here's sort of the issue. If we're banking on them running out before then, which is what's going to happen, let's be honest, we're not going to get replicators from Star Trek or infinite power. Then what we're asking for is like, well, as long as America goes through some Venezuela for a while, I'm sure we'll come out fine on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to avert that, and forgive my selfishness, but I'd like to avert it for at least 2 generations, because I think that should be, to some degree, all the hope we can have, which is to say that I should teach my children to attempt to avert it for 2 generations. They should teach their children. And as long as we can keep averting it for 2 generations every generation, we're good.
But what do you have left at the end of that, though? You don't have it, because in the meantime, the progressives have eaten everything, all of the institutions and culture.
Preferably, the way I teach my children to avert it is to actually be conservative. Like, what I teach my children is... If
you break it down differently, pardon me for interrupting, but if you break it down differently, given that our world is sort of so multifaceted, there's nothing that's preventing us feeding a dose of Venezuela to progressives in their particular areas. I mean, it's not necessarily uniform across the entire world, right? I mean, these lessons might be able to be taught more acutely.
I think you
Could you give an example of that, please?
Porn.
I was asking Distributus, could you give an example of that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about some kind of snapback in terms of global growth, which I think is what we're talking about here, right? Eventually, this is going to be something that it might be necessary to cut into progressive dominance. It's not uniform, right? You can insulate yourself from it. You can insulate certain communities, so you're not necessarily the ones taking the full brunt of it.
You're beginning to run out of it, by the way.
Okay. I feel.
I probably also have to. I'm way past time. Do we want to wrap up this particular discussion? I know we're not going to solve the culture war right here, but I was just going to try to end on people looking forward. I just lost Catholic Wench. And
I'm so sorry.
No.
Well, I can suggest something that I think can be done kind of in the moment and is good for winning the war.
Okay. Perfect. Let's try to wrap up the culture war discussion, then we can go on to our final thoughts heading into 2018, and I'll leave it there.
Well, I'll start with my thing. I think the best thing that can be done, because the left is already sort of doing it, but pushing them along, is convincing progressive white men that it's a church with no salvation, and so they should just leave and not help out the progressives anymore. It could be something as simple as going to a college Antifa meeting and telling the invariably white male leader that he represents the power structure, and so he has to go, and they need to put in a woke transgender woman or something. So like, that's the most prudent thing I think can be done. That's easy and effective.
Who wrote the article, Church with No Salvation?
It was on the right stuff, but their blog is kind of down now, so you'd have to go through the web archive to find it.
You know what's hilarious is there's an anime magazine that's also called The Right Stuff.
That was by design?
Well, regardless, I believe that blogger, Life for the Purpose, also made a similar YouTube video. It was very good, actually, about how forgiveness was necessary and how it might actually save us. But sorry, anyone else want to comment on the culture war stuff before we?
Yeah. I would want to comment, I suppose, on what David said. Is that Cedarwood? Is that I think I could wrap this up. Is that maybe that would be an interesting project going forward, right? That trying to convince progressives, particularly white male progressives, maybe also white females or black males, that they don't asking them what do they gain by being progressive.
Well, some of them gain a lot.
Yeah.
You don't want the answer to that question. It's just
I mean, isn't that what's interesting?
It plays into the victim narrative, and
I think what you have to do is
a white male progressive. How are they a victim?
Oh, they'll vent some way, and also, or if they're not a victim, they'll just humble brag about their privilege as they climb the ranks.
They'll talk about class issues or things like that.
Their ability to defend those in need, right? Which sort of plays into just general male genetics, right? Like, we all like to defend those who are under our purview.
The idea is that you make it really hard and obnoxious for them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say that David has something there, but I think we really just don't have the time to give this issue the depth it needs. Maybe we can have two plebs, expat, Cedarwood and Fritz on in a future stream to discuss this with a little bit more time and consideration, because I have to get going now.
Let's let everyone else wrap.
Sure.
Yeah. So go ahead, Expat. You want to put a code on the culture war thing?
Yeah. Just the one quick thing I would say is that maybe as long as we work on ourselves, and we can't fight the war if we're not in shape to fight it. So if we work on ourselves and then provide inspiration to others to do likewise.
That's a good way of putting it, and that segues into resolutions and perspectives going forward into 2018. I think we're ready to finish the stream, so do people want to just go around and say something?
If I could go first, if that would be okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I actually would go along with what Reactionary Expat said, is that, yeah, I'm planning for my New Year's resolutions to do a lot more self-improvement in my own life, especially concentrating on, physical fitness and physical and mental fitness, both exercise and trying to read more, because I've developed a really bad habit of I don't read nearly enough, and I've sort of shot my attention span. And so trying to be able to just sit down and read a book, because right now I think it's going to be an excellent Catholic novel, Father Elijah by Michael O'Brien, and I think it won't be long before I'm going to have to start shilling it to everybody. So that's about it for me.
All right. Anyone else want to take a shot at it?
I'll do it. Organize my life better and read as well.
Okay. I think mine is definitely trying to be more positive. I want to kill pessimistic distributists and perhaps even pessimistic Dave in real life.
Well, I think I'll piggyback off Dave. I'd love to find a way to not be pessimistic. And I think that it will be my primary goal of 2018. That said, I think in a way that will chagrin everyone in this stream, I am an atheist that is pro-religion, which is to say, it doesn't work out for me, but goddamn, it seems to work out for all the rest of you. And
so you're a good atheist.
Well, maybe.
I'm the same. You're not alone.
To be honest, I'm probably the same too.
Look.
It's called deism. Just do it.
Don't be Thomas Paine, though. That guy was a prick.
I'm definitively not Thomas Paine, though I am reading a lot of him along with everybody else. But the reality is I am such a libertarian douche that, like, if you like religion, you're right to like it as long as you don't think that you liking religion means you should blow other people up. I'm pretty easygoing.
I'll say this. Thank you all for popping by this really disorganized stream. It was really chaotic, and some people thought that was more interesting early on, and then we got kind of focused, and I found that more interesting later. I hope to see you guys all on future live streams, and yeah, I'm going to be doing a variety of things this coming year, including, for people listening, I'm going to be doing a radio broadcast this New Year's of 1930s radio. For 6 hours. So it's just an experiment to see lots of lectures, old classical music, old jazz standards, old poetry. So hopefully, if you're interested in tuning in on that, I'm sure I'll get multiple copyright notifications, but it'll be fun nonetheless. So yeah, thanks everyone for showing up, and I hope to see you. We'll definitely have to organize a future live stream for what we were just discussing. So
have a good night.
Yeah, have a good night.
And Happy New Year's.
Good night, everybody. Thanks,
Bye.
Dave.
Bye. Cheers.